have a simple project open up. Now, I want to show you the designer. So far, we've been working just specifically in this code editor, but the designer is just a button click away. And you can switch between text editor or form editor. You can use the middle mouse to move it around, control middle mouse, zoom in, zoom out. It's extremely cool. There's some basic parts that we're going to cover in future videos, but I wanted to really familiarize you with some of the basic components. You have your QML types, and you can also filter these. You can simply drag and drop, and you have the navigator. You notice how it immediately popped up. One little gotcha here is if you were to click off and you just try to select, sometimes that won't actually grab them. An example would be this little eyeball over here. Let's grab him and let's just check him. Suddenly, it's gone. And you can't select it, and you're like, oh no, where'd it go? You go in here, and there's your rectangle, and you go, oh, I know how to figure this out. And save, and it's still gone. Well, maybe it needs to be a bright color here. Nope, still gone. Where is it? And then you just click this again, and voila, it's there. Notice we did the border color. We could have actually done this. And let's do that again. Dot, gone. But it's down here. So what is this? These are states. And if you click this button, you're going to get an error. Boop, invalid properties. So that confuses a lot of people. States are a little bit more advanced, but basically you can take an object and have multiple states. For example, let's say you have a pet cat. The cat could be happy, it could be hungry, could be tired. Those are different states. Let's go back here. Boop, there it is. And you can click this little guy, which will export a property at the root item. Graphically, it doesn't seem to do a whole lot, but if you flip into the text editor, this is what it does. It makes a property alias. We've seen that before. We click this and toggle it on or off. Very, very helpful. And of course, we can drag and drop this around. You'll get these little lines, see if I get one to snap up, which show you where the center is. Also, we have some layout. We can set anchors just a mouse click away. We can center it. We can fill it. We can center it. And we have some advanced properties as well. Now, this editor is extremely powerful. On the surface, you're looking at this like, whoa, I don't understand what any of this stuff is. But once you start finding your way through, it's extremely powerful. Let's play around with the editor a little bit more. Go into design, and we're automatically in the form editor. We're going to take a few rectangles here. Drag that, and let's just drag another one on there. Notice how by default they're white on a white background, so it's not very helpful. What we can do is multi-select them, and let's just pick a color here. That's actually the border, and I want a bright color. Let's make that border stand out a little bit more. So we're going to say border 10. Let's give this a radius of 15. Just making those look really interesting. Don't like that border color, so let's actually do something a little dark red here. There we go. It's very easy to very quickly manipulate properties, is what I'm trying to drive home here. And at any time, you can go into the code editor and make changes. Notice how the IDs are set automatically, and in the navigator, they're laid out. One little trick, one thing that you can do. Let's say we want to take rectangle 1, this guy. Ta-da, there's its ID, and make it a child of rectangle. So you just simply click and drag up, and you see that little white line that appeared underneath it. See that? Let's get that in there. Bang, there it is. And now it is a child. Graphically, nothing changed. It doesn't look like it even moved, but it is now a child. Let's go ahead and go in here and see what happened. Up, there we go. So we have our rectangle, and rectangle 1 is now a child. We have X, Y, width, height, blah, 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 and everything just works. This is extremely cool stuff. And if at any time you want to unchild this or set this back at the root, and let's actually do it at the code so you can see what's going on, you can just drag it up. Ta-da, there it goes. No longer a child. Graphically, nothing's changed. Another fun example is playing around with connections, bindings, and properties. Let's go ahead and jump into the designer here, and we're going to make a few rectangles. Going to just do this, and if I don't like that, I can actually hard code the size in. Whoops, let's do 100. 10's a bit small. 100 by 100. And let's set a background color here. Ta-da! We can actually grab this. We're on the keyboard, I'm hitting Control-C to copy, but you can also edit and then copy. And then you can either Control-V on the keyboard to paste and move it around, or you can take the mouse, right-click, and paste. Move these around. Those lines snap to grid, so you can see very quickly, very easily how to align things up. And everything just works. This is so elegant, so beautiful. I love it. So let's take this guy, and let's make him a different color. And let's make him yet a different color. Ta-da! Everything's lined up. Everything's cool. And if we wanted to, we could, of course, make this a child of him and make this a child of him as well. We can move them around, make that a child as well. However we want to order them. It's actually really, really simple. So let's look at connections, bindings, and properties. I'm going to take this guy here, and we're just going to click this plus, and notice how it's rectangle on clicked. And we can open that by right-clicking on it, and it just says print clicked. So let's explore that. Save and run. And I'm going to get to the application output here. Nothing's happening. Why not? So it's rectangle on clicked. Why is this not happening? Let's take a look here. Let's go into our text, and I'm going to close some of this stuff down. It says connections, target, rectangle on clicked. Well, doesn't really help us a whole lot. Nothing's happening because there's no mouse area. The rectangle itself doesn't actually have an on-clicked signal. So it can be a little misleading how that works. Now we 100% can put a mouse area in there and then do that, but it's not super helpful. One of the little caveats here. Let's try that again. Let's go in here, select a different rectangle. Notice how it's rectangle 1 on-clicked, and we have a different connection. Save and run. Application output. Notice how QML connections cannot assign property to non-existent property, or cannot assign to non-existent property, I should say. So it's smart enough to know that that's an error, but it's not smart enough to know that that doesn't exist in the first place. That's one of the major sources of confusion right off the bat for beginners. They're like, well, why can't I do on-clicked on the rectangle? Well, because the rectangle simply doesn't have an on-clicked. So to get over that, you would do something like a mouse area. So you could put the mouse area in the rectangle. And let's actually make these independent. Graphically, nothing's changed, but they're now independent. This mouse area is now a child of this rectangle. Mouse area, of course, is an invisible object. We're going to go to Layout, and we want to, you guessed it, fill the parent. Now, let's go ahead and delete these because they do nothing for us. We can click that mouse area, go bang, on clicked. Let's try this. And notice how that little warning is gone. And if we go in here, we can click that all day and it just works. Very, very cool. All right, so let's take this a little bit further here. Let's click rectangle 1. And let's say we want the width. And we're going to set binding here. Notice how we can select an object. So let's select rectangle. And we don't want the border width. And we can select, let me move this over here. This is the binding editor. It gets to be a little cumbersome, but you get the point. You can basically say, so we want to bind this rectangle's width to that rectangle's width. And you can use that, or you can just, see how they're undefined? Type it out. Personally, you'll see me type it out quite a bit because I just do not have the patience to go ahead and just hunt and peck for those things. Notice how it's got this little chain here, so it knows it's linked. Let's do the same thing with height. Set that binding. Move this over so you can see what's going on here. smart enough to know what we did, hit OK, and the bindings are there. We could click plus and it tries to figure out what we're doing. I really don't want a binding to the gradient, so I'm just going to delete that. And if we wanted to go in and change it, we can just try to double click it, and there we go. And then we can select it from this list. We could also see if it's going to let me. Nope, not going to let me do it. We go source item, and it gets a little picky. You can see I'm struggling here with the mouse. There we go. So sometimes it likes it, sometimes it doesn't. When in doubt, you can always go into the text, and you notice we got this little guy here. Interesting. But you can go in here and search around and see what's going on. Ah, there's our binding right there. Interesting how that works. Now, what is this? This is actual code the designer uses to figure out all the things what we just did, because sometimes the designer gets a little confused and it needs a little help. So it's saying, hey, designer, blah, blah, blah. You can actually delete this without any major consequences most of the time. I say most of the time, but you notice as soon as you save it, blah, puts it right back in. Delete and save. Boom, it's right back. So if you see that jumping back in, no, you're not seeing ghosts. That's actually being put in there. So to test our binding, what we're going to do here is we're going to take that mouse area. Remember we did this connection here. Ta-da! And on clicked, we're going to take this. And let's say rectangle dot width equals, I'm going to shrink it down, rectangle dot height, and I'm going to beef it up. Maybe not that high. Save and run. Click it, bang, instantly changes. Let's play around with this a little bit more. Let's look at a property. We're going to go into design, and we're going to take a rectangle, drag it in there. We could also just drag it down here, and it plops it in at 0, 0, and move it around. Okay, so it's a little hard to see. So I'm going to set both of these to a blue color. Going to just select one of these, and let's move that around. And there we go. Let's take them both and just kind of drag them. Really, the point is, it's really easy to just snap these in and line them up. Got to take him, set that to a darker green. Very easy to work with. Now, each object here, we can go into properties. So let's just say we want to make a mouse area in this rectangle here. And let's go ahead and take our mouse area, and we're going to fill that parent so that whole thing's clickable. You notice these little handles here, so you can actually move it around manually if you felt like it. But when we click this, we want to change a text object over here. So let's say text. We're going to drag that in here. And ta-da, it's way up there. It's hard to see though. Let's go to the layout, and oh, we've got multiple selected, so let's select this one. And we're going to center that. Bang, bang. It's a little hard to see, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. Let's go ahead and say bold, and let's make this 35. Much easier to read. And I want to set the color here, so let's change this to a white. Super easy to mess around with this. And again, if you're not very inclined with the mouse and you're having trouble selecting this, you can just do it down here. Ta-da! Now, notice the ID is element. Yeah, this gets a little squirrely in its naming conventions. It's a little weird. What I want to do now is I want to take this mouse area, and when we click it, change that. There's two ways we could do this. First off, we could go in here and we could go to a connection, mouse area on clicked, and we can open that connection editor, and we can actually type in the code here. So we could say, what was it, element. Ta-da! We could also go into the code here, and we could do the connections mouse area on clicked element, blah, blah, blah. and let's test all this just to make sure it works. So now when I click this, hello, there's another really cool feature, and it's called a property. We haven't played around with it a whole lot. So I'm going to click this guy, this green rectangle. I'm going to flip over to properties, and ta-da, there it is. Not super helpful. What does this mean? Property 0 string. What? This makes absolutely no sense. And trying to click on it, it doesn't bring up an editor. Right click doesn't matter. You notice how sometimes these change? You can edit them in place. So you can say like title, it is a string. And I want to set that to nothing, or let's say hello by default. Or we could change this to title. It's just a little weird that it's different than these others where you can actually do stuff with them. It's just this in-place editor. You can also go in here and voila, there it is. So it doesn't matter if you use this little guy or if you actually, let's go ahead and delete this. Notice how it disappeared down here. So we're going to say property, string, title, and you notice how it's doing it down here. And in pretty much real time, it's updating it. You might notice a little bit of lag, especially if you click off on a different element, but it's not super bad. So what we can do now is go back here and go back to our connections. And if you don't like messing around with all these little editors and things, you can absolutely do it in here. I do this quite a bit. There are times I get frustrated, I just go right back to here and do it. So doesn't really matter which way you do it. All right, let's go here and we're going to say rectangle 1 title equals hello. So really what we're doing now is we're changing that property. And then we can actually grab this and we could say title. Ta-da! So we're grabbing that right there. And we could actually do it up in the editor as well. But you notice, even though we typed it, it's smart enough to notice there's a binding. There's our little chain icon right here. Ta-da, parent title. We could actually reset this, and it changes it. Let's go ahead and set a binding through this, and we're going to say parent. Now, this is where IntelliSense will fail us. You notice how it's not smart enough to go in and figure out what's going on. You could say, okay, well, I want the rectangle 1, and then, nope, it's still not there. Oh, that is frustrating. So that's one of the little gotchas. Let's go ahead and just, I want you to watch right here how it changes automatically. So we're going to say parent, and we're not even done typing, and it's already got a binding icon in there. And it automatically changes it to the text. Now you can, let's get rid of this. You can go in and let's say you don't like doing it that way. And oop, it's gone. So you can just click this, set binding. And even though these are not super helpful, you can actually just type it. And once you click OK, it's smart enough to figure things out. Let's go ahead and check this and make sure everything just works. Save and run. Now when I click this, it should change that. Let's take a deep look at states. Now when I say deep, I mean not very deep at all, because states are actually very advanced here. So what we're going to do is we are going to make another component. We're going to right click, add new, and let's call this my box. So let me get down to QML file, my box, and we're just going to leave it as default. Notice how it's an item right off the bat. So let's go into the designer. Now, even though the item is a non-visual element, the designer can 100% help us out here. For example, we can say we want this to be an ID of element, and we want some properties here. So I'm just going to make a few. So item, property, and let's call this off color. And this is going to be a color. And let's move over here so you can kind of see what's going on. Like I said, this part gets a little squirrely, and I never could figure out why. So let me expand this out. There we go. Da 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 da. Boom, color. And it automatically changes over to a color. I'm just going to type in the word red. Bang. Now, if that's a little cumbersome for you, what you can do is you can go in here and just simply go, oh, what is this? Well, it's smart enough to know, hey, it has to escape those. There we go. We're going to make it actually work. So we'll call this on color. And let's call this default color. You see what I mean by sometimes I get a little frustrated and I like to work right in the code editor instead of playing around with this. I mean, look at all these things now. What is all this? We don't have all those. We only have 3 of them. But if I save, what happens? It still thinks I've got a bunch of them in here. It gets a little weird sometimes. So green. And let's change this to gray. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to flip back to the form editor. And I'm going to take a rectangle, just drag and drop him in. And you notice this checkerboard kind of denotes where it's going to be transparent because the item itself is invisible. And we're going to take this rectangle and we're going to, let's go ahead and set a property here. And we're going to set this to default color. And it's smart enough to figure that out. Now let's go over to our layouts. We're going to actually fill the parent, which is this little icon here. Or you could have done that in the actual text editor. Let's go ahead and go here and let's go radius. And we want to say width. Again, we could have done something like that in here. See, radius, bang, bang. It's got that little chain here showing that it's a binding. Now, the base state here, you notice this little plus icon. Let's switch gears here for a minute. Let's go back here, go into the main, go into design. Now, if you remember, if we just click this, we get invalid property name states M16. That is frustrating. Let's go back into my box, go into design, and do the same thing. Suddenly, we have another state. Why? You cannot do this on a normal item. It's got to be a specific component. It's very frustrating the way that works. Anyways, now we have a state. So we have a base state, and then we have state 1. And let's call this on. So the on state, we're going to go in here. We're going to click our rectangle, and we're going to set that binding to on color. Drag this over here so you can see me hit OK. Do you see what's going on here? So we have a base state and an on state. So a state defines, you guessed it, what properties are changing. And if we go into the code, you can sure enough see property changes, target, color, on color for this state. Let's go ahead and make another state here. Oh, didn't like that. So let's click our base state. Still didn't like that. Wow. Oh, we made a bunch of them. That's one of the confusing bits here. So if you do what I did and you needed to get rid of some, you just click the little X here. And I'm going to scale this out so I have a little bit more real estate. It can be a little frustrating. And if there's just too many of them, you can just obviously go into the text editor and blow them away. Its default naming convention will just simply put a number by anything. And we're just going to grab some of these and go, bang, don't want those. And expected token is where we get stuck on. You can do it manually, or you can also do it via code. So let's just take this state, add a comma, bang, because this is an array. Without that comma, we're going to have a bad time. Now we have 2 states with the same name. That'll actually give us some sort of issue. So we'll say off. We're going to change our rectangle, which is our target, and we're going to change this to off color. So essentially, we have 3 states. We have default or base state, on, and off. And if we go into the form editor, we can select what state we want and then modify the properties for that specific state. Extremely powerful, also extremely confusing. And the fact that we can't do that on, you guessed it, a window, or a normal object as it's called, really screws us up. So what we can do now is we can actually take my box and plop it in here. Now, this is another little confusing bit. If we go in here, here is my box. You notice it's got this custom little thing. We can drag and drop it, but it's not there. It's just gone. Actually, it's just 0 by 0. So now we got to go, and you guessed it. 2000's a little big. Let's go with 200. There we go. Let's grab this little guy and move him over here. Ta-da! Very, very cool. Very easy. Let's actually take a mouse area and put that in, you guessed it, our little My Box. I want that mouse area to take up all of that. So I'm going to go to Layout, fill that parent. Now it's clickable. Going to go in here, and you can actually go to Connections, bang, mouse area on-click, or of course you can do this in the text editor. You have your connections on click. Now, sometimes you don't really want this connections. You want it up here. So you can 100% blow that away and go like this, and then just code right in here. The problem with doing this is the minute you do that, there is no connections in here. So if you're okay with that, this 100% works. So you can say if parent dot state, and this is just a string. And we're going to flip that off. And let's say let's go back into our component just because I want to check out those states. Yes, okay. So looking at these colors, so off is red, on is green, default's gray. So basically what we've made here is a mini stoplight. Let's go into design view. You can see it's in its default state. Save and run. And when we click this, ta-da, we are flipping that state. States are very, very advanced. We are just hitting the tip of the iceberg on this, so I don't want to confuse you too much, but basically think of a state as you can take an object, not a window. You can take an object and add states to it. Those states, you can take property changes. The editor's smart enough to know, hey, when you're modifying a state, the properties of that state change. So what you really need to understand is you can do some really cool things, but it can just take the complexity of this and shoot it right through the roof. Images can get a little frustrating in the designer. Let's take a real quick look. So we're going to go to design, and you notice we're in the resource tabs. Well, there's nothing there. What we can do is, and I'm going to go up a level, I'm going to grab Mr. Bean, put him right here, paste. Now there he is. Drag and drop. There's Mr. Bean. Let's go ahead and just put him in there, and let's actually make him take up the entire scene here. Save and run, and Mr. Bean is gone. That's what I mean by this can get super, super frustrating. Mr. Bean, why have you betrayed us? Let's go ahead and delete that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go in here and remove him. Sorry, Mr. Bean. And I'm going to add this button, and I'm going to go back to where the image previously was, where a notch above. I'm going to grab him, and ta-da, add resources. Note, if you click this button and your image is not there, it's because it's a non-supported image type. So for example, JPEG is not supported. Let's go ahead and show that real quick. So we're going to go up here, rename Mr. Bean. Even though it's literally the same file, suddenly doesn't see it. That gets frustrating. Now we suddenly see it. We're going to open that bad boy up and boom, it wants to add it to a resource. Ta-da, there's Mr. Bean. And if we go in, there he is. He's now in our resource file. What does that mean in our resource file? That means now we can drag him and we can go in here and save and run. And there's Mr. Bean. So why didn't he appear the first time? Well, it's because he was not part of this resource file. So when we built our application and ran it, it didn't know where to pull Mr. Bean from. It gets super frustrating. Everything we've been doing up to this point inevitably leads to controls. We've actually built our own components or controls using a rectangle and a mouse area. We've actually built like a generic button. But there's really no point in reinventing the wheel. I wanted to show you how you can build something from the ground up, but a lot of this is already pre-built for you, and they're called Qt Quick controls. Notice it's Qt Quick, not Qt QML controls. QML is the language, and Quick is the framework which has all the controls in it. Looking at the documentation, it's a little bit sparse. Qt's usually world-renowned for their documentation, but in this area, it's a little bit lacking. Some prerequisites: you have to import the controls and the specific version. That's one of the little gotchas because the controls do change from version to version. Sometimes that change is drastic, sometimes it's barely noticeable. You also have to, on the C++ side, if you're going to use that, use the Qt Quick controls too, and you have to add the actual libraries. A lot of that's done for you automatically. Versioning is kind of a hot issue. Versioning is going away in Qt 6. Now when I say going away, it's actually going to be a little bit simpler. This is how you would import in Qt 5. Notice it's import, what you're importing, and the version. In Qt 6, from what I've heard, it's just going to be import and then whatever you're importing. You leave the version off. So that's a change that's going to happen once Qt 6 is released, and I'm going to re-record all these videos for Qt 6 into a complete new course when it comes out. I just wanted you to be aware. Scrolling down, there is a lot you can do with this. The topics are actually pretty good. They go from general guidelines and stylings, icons, high DPI support, so on and so on. And it goes into some pretty cool examples. For example, the gallery, a text editor, automotive example, music player, and so on. Now, these examples, while really good, also come with the caveat that you kind of need to know what you're doing before you dive into the example, which is, well, the chicken or the egg problem. Here is the automotive example, and this is a really cool example. It kind of simulates an in-dash display. And you can do something all the way up to, for example, a music player. Again, these are very advanced examples, and you kind of have to get out of basic land, which we're in basics right now, just to understand what they're talking about. Otherwise, when you look at these examples, you're going to be pretty lost. So the example we're going to use in this video is very simple. We're just going to import the controls and drag and drop some onto a window. We have a dial, we have a progress indicator, a checkbox, and a delay button. Let's take a look and see what it takes to make this happen here. All right, first things first, I'm going to flip into the design view. I'm going to go to the imports tab and click down, and you can see there's Qt Quick Controls 2.3. I'm going to click that and it adds it. As soon as it adds it, you can go to the types and you have the controls available. One special note, if we flip in and we go here and just hit dot, you notice there are versions higher than 3. Qt does its best to figure out what's going on. Sometimes you may need, say, a specific version. I'm just going to leave it as 3. And let's go ahead and drag and drop some controls on here. So we're just going to drag this in here. And the busy indicator, let's say I want to put that dead center. Save and run. Let's see what that looks like. Ta-da! One of the little gotchas is sometimes it won't appear in the designer, but it appears in the window. It's actually there, it's just not currently running. Kind of weird how that works. Let's take a look at the dial, and I'm going to just scale this down. Checkbox. And we have buttons and delay buttons. So really, what's the difference here? A button is similar to what we've made, where a delay button you can actually click and hold it down. And let's take a look at this example here. Here's our dial, our progress, our checkbox, and our delay button. We're going to take a look at a very simple control, the humble label. Now the label, as humble as it is also very powerful. You can do some really cool things with it. For example, just normal text, stylized text, or inline HTML. This is extremely cool. So let's take a look. I've already got the import in there. Qt Quick Controls 2.3. Doesn't really matter which version you've got. And if you don't feel like hunting and pecking for it, you can just filter it. We're going to drag and drop a label on here. If that's a little too small, you can hit the control key and use the middle mouse to zoom in. It will pixelate, and you can use the middle mouse to move around. I'm going to zoom back out. So I'm going to say this is a label. If I hit enter, or if I click off, it's going to automatically scale that and set the text. Now, you notice the text is also over here. It doesn't really matter which one you modify. For example, I'm going to drag another one. We get that nice line, lets us know we're snapping to the same edge. I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to edit it over here this time. I'm going to say, this is a long label title. Probably the longest ever. And it's just a normal text editor. So if I don't like this, I can highlight it, bang, delete it out. Now I'm going to word wrap this, and you see why. It's just very long. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say, let's word wrap that. And now I can drag this, and it wraps around. I can also stylize it. So if I don't like the color, I can say, well, let's make this like a shade of red. And you know what? I want to bold underline that, and maybe even italic it. Very cool. Let's take a look at inline HTML. And to do this, I'm going to actually flip over to the text editor. And here is that label right here. I wanted to do it in the text editor so you can really see what's going on here. This is, and I'm going to say font equals, actually, not going to do that. I'm going to say color equals single quotes because we're inside of double quotes, and I'm going to say blue. And then I'm going to turn on bold, turn on italic. And if you understand HTML, you know that once you turn something on, you have to turn it back off. So we're going to turn off bold, turn off italic, and then let's turn off that font styling. So this is, and then we have some HTML, and let's go ahead and put some stuff in here. So I'm going to say I want the H bold, and then I want the T italic. And actually, I need to flip these around. There we go. And then we'll say ML back in bold land, and then just some exclamations. We can save that. We've got it selected over in the navigator, and you notice how the text has also changed as we've typed. So it doesn't really matter whether you do it in the editor or in the property editor or actually in the form editor. That's really small, so I want to take this and I want to beef this up a bit. I'm going to say 45 point, boom. And it gives you a real time what you see is what you get. You can also click this little live preview button, and it just shows you, ta-da, this is what it would look like if you run it. So let's actually run it to see what this looks like. This is extremely simple and extremely easy to work with, but also very powerful. In this example, we're going to take the label and add a mouse area, and we're going to control this busy indicator. This is also called a progress indicator, but it's not a true progress indicator. A true progress indicator will show an actual percentage, where this just shows that, hey, something's happening. And we want to be able to click this label to turn it off and click the label to turn it back on. Very simple, very easy. So let's jump in here. I have already got the controls imported, and I've already got it filtered. So we've got the busy indicator, and I'm just going to drag this, and I want to scale that around a little bit. Now you notice you have these lines. That's the snap to grid line. There's dead center. And if you're having a hard time finding that, you can go into the layout tab. For example, you just click bang, layout, and you have these guys. So you can snap it there and snap it there. That sets the anchors. Very cool. And if you don't like those anchors, you can just move it around. Notice how it's still got them. So you can unselect it and then reselect it and it puts it right back. Let's go ahead and find a label. And let's put that label right here. Now, you see that line? That is the top of this indicator. We want to put this about here. And then let's go pull right there. Bang. And I'm going to just change this. Now, let's move him down just a smidge. I'm just showing you how easy this is. And I want to change this. Remember, we want to display the indication here of what's going on. So I'm going to go set binding. And I'm going to say busy indicator dot running. And in real time, you can see it's actually pulling that property from the busy indicator. Let's go ahead and make this clickable and make this work. So I want a mouse area. And we're going to take that mouse area and just drag it right into the label. That way it becomes a child. Now we could do the connection, or we can jump right into the actual text editor and work with it this way. So let's say we're going to fill the parent, in this case the label, and I want to say on clicked, and I want if busy indicator dot running and I'm going to say console dot log, just so we get some sort of console feedback here. We're going to turn that off, and I'm just going to simply say busy indicator dot running equal false. You notice how there's no stop and start. And then let's go ahead and turn it back on. Save. And we can go here. Now, if we click this in the designer, nothing's going to happen. If we show this preview and click, you notice it actually is running. So what's really the difference between the preview and actually running? That is kind of a mystery and a science in itself. This does actually do its best attempt to run it, but it's not quote unquote fully running the program. There's a whole lot of details that we can't really go into. Just know that preview and actual running are two different things. But we can click this and it works. This video, we're going to explore the button. We've actually built buttons before, but this one's different. This is the Qt Quick Controls button. And we're going to be able to do something like this, where we click a button and it just simply changes the picture. There are many, many ways of doing this. So your way of doing it may be slightly different than the way I'm doing it. And this is going to be another end-to-end video, meaning raw, unedited, unfiltered. You'll see every single mistake I make. So first things first, going to paste some images in here. These are the actual images we're going to use. And I'm just going to add these in as resources. So what we need to do now is right click, open in the editor. Let's add a prefix. And then let's add some files. Ta-da, there they are. They're images. I'm probably going to name that something different, but we're just going to leave it the way it is. Now we're going to jump back here. We're going to go to Design View. And here we're going to actually import. So let's go here, and we want our controls. There they are. I want to section this off. So first thing I want to do is I want to grab this window, And I want a specific color here. So let's do pound, and let's say 7B. So it should be like a gray. There we go. Make it whatever color you want, or you can simply use the color chooser and you can like kind of drag it around and do something like this. There we go. I just want some type of darker color than the actual button. Let's go ahead and let's take a row here. We're going to grab this row and we're going to drag and drop it. You notice right off the bat, it has this kind of funky size. And if we click on it, it has a default size of 200 by 400. It actually tries to scale it via our little view here. So I'm going to grab this guy and I want to make this pretty much something like that. I'm going to zoom out using Control middle mouse. And I'm going to put this right here like this. The premise being I'm going to put buttons in this row. And I want to actually, I don't want it that high. Let's do 45. There we go. Spacing, let's make 5 pixel spacing. That way the buttons will be spaced out. And now we can just drag and drop some buttons in here. So different types of buttons, we just want the standard button. So I'm going to drag and drop there. You see there's the first one. So we're going to want 1, 2, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons because we got 4 images. So there's our first button. Notice we lost our filter here. And there's 2, 3, and last but not least 4. And we can label these appropriately. So I'm going to just double click on it, say cat, and let's do dog. Let's do fish next, which of course would leave the bird for very last. And you don't have to double click. You can simply select it and type it in the text property if you want. Notice this button has a lot of different properties, like different things. You can check it, you can make it a repeater, things like that. We will cover that, but right now we're just talking specifically how do you make this button actually work. If we save and run, you can see there's our button and it slightly changes color. I'm not sure if the video is really doing it justice, but it changes color as we click it. So what we're going to do now is add an image and make these buttons clickable. And we're going to take this image and I'm going to collapse that row down. I'm just going to add it to the window. You notice how it drops it down, but it also plops it right on top. That's one of the little gotchas here. So we're going to actually drag that. You notice how it's not doing us any favors. I'm going to Control Z. This is one of the little frustrating parts of the editor here. So I'm going to drag this down here, or I can drag it here if I want a pixel perfect control. So again, if I dragged it down onto the navigator, it's going to plop it at 0, 0. So I dragged it from here to here. Ta-da! All right, so we've got this annoying little where it says image. Let's save and run, see what that does when we run it. Of course, it's gone. You remember our conversation previously about how images in the designer can get a bit frustrating. So really what that is just a temporary placeholder is what's going on there. And we can see that's part of the Qt Quick plugin. It's actually part of the resource file, the QRC. So let's actually set the anchors on this. So I'm going to just scale this down here. And then I'm going to slide it over here. I'm going to grab this little handle. And ta-da! Now let's go over to our layout. Here's our anchors. So what I'm going to do is anchor at top, bottom, left, right. That way it will scale as we need it. Save and run. Can't really see it, but there's an image here, and as I move this window around, it's going to scale appropriately. Now let's make these things clickable. There's multiple ways we could do this. We could either A, go into the text editor, and then say something like onClicked, or we can use a connection. There's a bit of, I don't want to call it a holy war, but there's a huge debate basically on what is the appropriate way to do it. And depending on who you talk to, you're going to get different answers. So I'm going to take this button, I'm going to say plus button onClicked. So what's going to happen now is it's got this connection down here. And then we can just simply make this work. So on clicked, what we want to do is we want to say image.source, and we're going to say equals, and then we're going to set it. So we're just taking this image, setting the source. Let's go ahead and grab our source name. So I'm going to say, what was that first one? Cat. Right click, I'm going to copy that resource name, and then just paste it in here. Now we can do a little bit of copy and paste magic. If we don't feel like going through that designer, we can actually do it right through this, and we can actually say connection, and we want button 1, which is dog. So I'm going to say button 1, change this to dog. We can very quickly do this if we don't want to mess around with the actual designer. Button 2 is fish. Just going to say 2 fish. Again, there are millions of ways to achieve the same results here. We're just doing this very quickly. So button 3 is bird. Ta-da! We could actually flip back to the designer, and you can see those connections are in there now. Which way's the right way? Hitting this plus button or doing it in the actual code? Well, there is no right way. That's the beautiful thing about coding. You can do it any way you want. Save and run, and let's click our buttons. We're going to look at the checkbox. It's deceptively simple, but it's also got a lot of customization. For example, it can be a normal checkbox. It can be not checkable. You notice how I'm clicking it and nothing's happening. It can be tri-state, meaning it can have multiple states. It can be exclusive, so once you check it, you really can't uncheck it manually. Or it can repeat, which is a little bit hard to explain, but basically if you click and hold down on it, it repeats. And we can actually reset them all. So let's build this little application and see what this takes. We're going to go into Design View. We're going to go to Imports, Qt Quick Controls. And first things first, I want to take a row. I'm going to drag and drop that row. I'm going to go over to my layout here, and I'm going to fill the entire parent, and I'm actually going to Control and scale out so we can see that whole little window. Now from here, we're going to grab a column, drag and drop right into that row. This column, we want it to be a special size. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say I want this to be 150 by 400, and let's say a spacing of 10. I want to space those out a little bit. Let's go ahead and find some checkboxes here. You'll notice there's a checkbox and a check delegate. The difference here is subtle, but basically when you see the word delegate in QML, think of model view programming. It's much more advanced than where we are right now. Basically, it takes a model, or a data set, if you will, and you can make a view, and that view can be different ways of looking at that data. So when you see delegate, that's what you should think of. We're just going to use the normal checkbox. I'm going to drag and drop, and we need bunches of these. And when I say bunches, we really need about 5 of them. So we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. One thing to note is you see in blue, that's what's selected. This is one of the frustrating little gotchas here. We've been dragging and dropping, but it's multi-selection. So if I drag and go, I want to do that last one, and we instantly flip over here, we're actually not even grabbing that last one. Let's go over to Navigator again. This is the last one right here. So I'd have to actually manually click, bang, there it is. Now it no longer says multi-select. If you wanted to multi-select, you simply hold down the Shift key and it'll select continuous, or you can hold down the Control key and do one at a time. Whenever you see multi-selection, you're modifying the properties of more than just one item. Be very careful about doing that. All right, so let's go ahead and zoom in. Remember to zoom in, you hold Control, middle mouse, and I'm just going to type the names. Normal, and this one is going to be not checkable. And as I type and hit enter, it appears over here. You could also select it here. You could select it over in the navigator as well, and then type it over here if you wanted to. So this one will be tri-state. Hit enter. Notice how it updates. There's a lot of debate over what's the correct way to do that. It really doesn't matter. It all does the same thing. So if somebody says, oh no, you should be double clicking, no, it doesn't matter. You can select it in the navigator and type it over here. Either way, does not matter one bit. So let's go ahead and let's call this exclusive. And exclusivity is a little bit hard to explain, but basically once you do it, it's exclusively checked, and there's a lot more that I'm kind of skipping over, but think of it in those terms. And then repeat, which basically once you click and hold, it's going to repeat and fire off that event in the background over and over again. They pretty much line up, so you can see repeat and then repeat. Suddenly true. Exclusive, exclusive. Tri-state. No tri-state. So this is another little gotcha here. Not all the properties are easily findable. For example, tri-state's actually right here. Boy, that gets frustrating. So why is tri-state up here? Because we're talking about the check state where these are part of the abstract buttons. So this goes into inheritance. The checkbox itself actually inherits from an abstract button, but adds some extra goodness on top of it. So if you're hunting and pecking, you're trying to figure out, think in terms of inheritance. If you just simply can't find it, you can always flip right into the editor and just type it out. All right, not checkable. We're going to simply uncheck checkable. And then normal, we're just going to leave it as is. And let's go ahead and find a button. And let's go ahead and drag this to our column. And it puts it right here. And I'm going to say reset. And so what that reset is going to do is it's actually going to flip all these back to their normal state. Let's go ahead and collapse that. I'm going to take another column. And we're going to drag it right here. Now I'm going to take this column that we just added, ta-da, and we're going to move that so that it is the same width and height. And I'm going to scale out a little bit here. This is a bit of the problem. When we click it, there's no little, I call them little grab handles. There's no little grab handle, so I can't just drag it. And that is one of the frustrating little bugs in this editor. As good as this editor is, sometimes it gets very confused. Remember, it's a child of the row, which takes the entire parent. You can see those little grab handles. Ta-da! But when we go, here's our first one, and here's our second one. So how do we fix this? Well, we can either go into the text editor or we can actually do it manually. So I'm going to say width is, let's say, I'm just going to guess 400. Oh, I was close. We could do 475. Almost spot on. What we could also do is we could say 15, just any number. Go here, set binding, and then we can actually do a bit of code. So we can say it is the parent width minus, and we want the X position. Notice how now suddenly, wham, it's over there. And we can do the same thing with height. We can set a binding, and we can just say, whoops, my mouse wants to cooperate here. We can do it. Set binding. I think I set it on the wrong one. I did. All right. Let's go back to the row here. Yeah, I'm going to reset that because I don't want that binding. Make sure we didn't screw up our layout here. There, and voila. Save and run. Graphically, it looks pretty good. We're going to put a label right in the center here. Grab that, drag, drop. Now you may be wondering, why did we even add these column here if we just wanted to add a label? Couldn't we have just added a label? We could have, but I want to take this label here. Notice how it selects it in the navigator. Again, doesn't matter which way you select it. And I want to actually center this in the parent. So I'm centering it in the column. If I hadn't put it in the column, its center would actually be over here somewhere, and I'd have to play around with offsets to get it dead center, and well, we'd be here a while watching me play around with the interface. So I want to say for the text status here, and I'm going to boldface that, and let's make this a 35 point, just something a little bigger. All right. Zoom in a little bit. Again, control middle mouse. That's how we zoom in and out. And we want to play around with these a little bit. So we have a couple ways of doing this. Either A, we can use the connections editor, or we can do it via code. There's no wrong way of doing it. Some people prefer to do it in the connections editor. Some people prefer to do it purely by code. You'll see me do a mixture of both just because I want to show you, hey, it doesn't matter which way you do it. So for example, I'm going to take this button, click here, bang, on clicked, flip into the text editor, and I'm going to actually scale that here just so I get a little bit of real estate. And I really don't like this because it's so crowded. I'll actually flip into the full editor, and now we can play around with this. So got our connection, targets the button, and here we're going to say the checkbox, and we want check state, and we say cute, and then we want unchecked. And through the magic of copy and paste, I know I have 5 boxes. They're named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually 1, 2, 3, 4 with checkboxes and normal. So I'm going to say 1, grab this, 2, 3, 4. So now we have our 5 boxes. Save, run, and let's play around with this. We can now reset them. But remember in our example, we had those different connections. So as you click that checkbox, something special would happen here. Let's go ahead and make another connections. I'm going to say target, and here we're going to say checkbox, and on clicked. It's not actually popping up. Sometimes IntelliSense does not help us, and this can be a little frustrating when this happens. Just because it's not helping us doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Here we're going to say label.text, and I'm going to say checkbox equals, and then we're going to add in the target dot check state. That is frustrating. So what is going on here? Why isn't IntelliSense helping us out? Because it's getting very confused by what it's supposed to be doing. That's the short explanation. The long explanation is it's being pretty lazy. It's saying, okay, I know there's a target, I know it's an object of some kind, but I don't know specifically this is a checkbox, and it's not going out and doing type checking and try to figure that out. I think in future versions of Qt and QML, Qt 6 for example, that's right around the corner, that type checking will take place so that you'll have a better IntelliSense experience. So really all we're saying is take this target, which is some object, in this case the checkbox, this guy up here, and then on clicked, we're going to do a bit of JavaScript here. We're saying take the labels text, make it checkbox equals plus, and then the target, check state. We can do this because it doesn't really care what type it is. So it's all going to happen in the background. Let's save and run and test this out. So as we go here, we can now toggle that state. And we're just going to do this for every single checkbox we have. Change the target. Notice how because we're using target, we don't have to have checkbox, checkbox 1, checkbox 2, We just have to have that specific target. Save and run, and let's test this out. So we have a normal checkbox. We have a not checkable. We have a try state. Notice how that's a 1. Now it's a 2, 0. We have an exclusive, so we can check it, but can't manually uncheck it. And repeat. And as I hold the mouse down, what's happening in the background is that connections getting fired off over and over and over again. And I can, of course, reset them. In the last video, we talked about there is a checkbox and there's also a check delegate. And I said the check delegate's a little bit more advanced. I wanted to touch on that briefly. I don't think it's fair to say it's too advanced, we're not going to talk about it. I want to show you just the tip of the iceberg so you understand what I mean by it's a little bit more advanced. So here we have 3 check boxes. Or do we? Actually, we don't. These are check delegates, but they look and act just like checkboxes. The difference is they're used in model view architecture. So let's jump in here. And I'm going to do this via code. You can do this via the editor if you want. And I'm going to import QQuick. And I want to do QQuick.controls. And I'm just going to do 2.3, but you can do whichever version you want. I'm going to say column. And let's just hand jam these in. So I want to say width, and I'm just going to guess width, height. Let's make this 400 and anchors. We're going to center this in the parent. And let's go ahead and add a label. So I'm going to say label. And let's give this a text. Really don't even need to do this, and I actually misspelled it. So it's Q string translate, and we're going to say selected here. And let's just say you're really sick of doing it like this. You can 100% seamlessly drop right into the editor. And let's say we wanted to do this as bold. So you could kind of hunt and peck and figure out where bold is, and then bang, there it is. And then you know what? You really don't want to do this anymore. You want to go back to the editor. You can seamlessly go back and forth. That's one thing I really love about this. We're going to take a list view. Notice there's list element, list model, list view. We want the list view because we're doing model view programming. So the view is what's displayed to the user. We can say width 200. Height 200. The model is the data that we're going to display. And in this case, we're just going to use an array, and we're going to say option A, option B, and option C. Now we need a delegate. So delegate's a little bit tricky to understand, but there's a model, view, and a controller. The delegate is actually the controller, and it's not a pure controller. It gets into way more advanced than we can talk about. But when you think delegate, think controller. It's going to control how that is actually rendered on the screen. And that's actually a function of the view, and that's why I said it's not a true controller. So Qt gets some flack for this because it's not a pure model view controller paradigm in the sense that you're thinking about. And this is what I meant by it gets really confusing. All right, so basics, what you need to understand is we have a view, we have a model, which is the data we're going to view, and then we have a delegate, which is going to determine how we view it. And we're going to say we want text. And this is going to be the model data. In case you're wondering how the heck I even came out with model data, did I just pick a name out of thin air? No. So if you start typing, IntelliSense is not going to help us out. You actually have to go in and read the documentation for the check delegate to figure out what model data is. And it gets a little bit lengthy and it can get a little confusing. See, ta-da, text model data. Really what it is every model follows a predictable pattern or an API, if you will. And the model data is, you guessed it, the data from the model, that specific item. So every time this is rendered, every time each object is rendered, it's going to go, where am I at? My position is 1 because it's 0-based. This is 1. There's our model data. Gets a little bit lengthy, but I think you get the point. And because this is a check delegate, we can use the events from the check delegate. I'm going to say on, and we want onCheck state changed. Label.text. If this seems very confusing, it's because it's very more advanced than where we are now. I just didn't want to leave you hanging and say, hey, what is he talking about? And I'm going to say index, which is the current index. And let's go ahead and say plus model data plus, and we're just building this string so that we can see it. So what does all of this gobbledygook mean? Let's break this down and explain it. First off, we just simply have our column, then we have our list view. I should say we have our label, but when we have our list view, the view is how we're going to view the model. The model is this. The delegate determines how we view that. In this case, we're just going to say the text of our check delegate is the model data. The model data is the current index where we're at. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, start this off. I need to render. There's 3 items. Item 0, that's the model data. Item 1, that's the model data. Item 2, that's the model data. And then each time it's going to call this bad boy. To demonstrate, let's run this. Index 0, the text is option A, and it's currently true. So let's just scroll this up so we can see what's going on in that delegate. So each time it's rendering that out. So there is option B, which is our text, option B. And when we change that state, it's going to call the onCheck state changed. And then it's going to say label text, this guy up here, is equal to the index, the model data, and the value. So we can just do things like this. Seems complex, seems confusing, and it's because it is. This is more advanced than what this series is really going to cover, but I wanted to show you the tip of the iceberg so you understood the difference between a checkbox and a check delegate. Whenever you see delegate, think model view programming. This video, we're going to look at the combo box. The combo box can hurt your brain just a little bit because it actually uses a model, and it is actually a model view component, but there's no delegate. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. So I know you've seen this before. This is a combo box. You just simply have a list of options you can click down and select. And of course, we can bind a custom model to it. So we can have not just someone's name, but their age. You notice this one we can edit and this one we cannot. So we can actually, and I'm going to demonstrate, let's add Bob. Let's say Bob is a newborn. Bob was just born today, and now Bob exists in our list. So let's see what it takes to make this work. First things first, let's flip into design view. Let's go to imports, and we're going to import QQuick controls, whatever version you feel comfortable with. I'm going to go to our form editor, and the first thing I want is a column. I'm going to drag and drop. I want to grab him, and I want to put him right in the center there. And then I want some labels. And then I want some combo boxes. Notice there's a combo box, but there's not like a combo delegate like there was with the checkbox. That's where it gets a little bit confusing. I'm going to drag and drop him right here. And then let's just get him all the way at the bottom. There we go. Going to take this column and I want to modify the spacing. Let's put some 20 in there. And I'm going to grab this little handle and resize it. You notice how you can do something like this? Try to avoid that. Really what's happening is you have the bounds of your column and the controls are going out of bounds. So if somebody accidentally turned clipping on, well, that's right, they magically disappear. So try to make sure you have plenty of room there. All right, let's go ahead and name these. And some people are going to say, well, you need to select these down in the navigator. You see how when I select it in the navigator, it selects it over here. But if I select it over here, it selects it in the navigator. You can also do it via code. So if I wanted to do this label, see how it jumped? And I'm going to jump up to this other label. It does it automatically. So it doesn't really matter where you do it. I'm going to say LBL food. Let's call this CMB food. oops, already exists. There we go. And let's call this CMB people. There we go. Now that I've got my ID squared away, I want to stylize this guy, and I'm going to say selected item. I want to select a color. Let's make this red, because why not? And let's say I also want this to be bold, and let's make it just a smidge taller. Maybe not that big. Let's go with 12. There we go. You notice how sometimes the interface wigs out a little bit and it just gets confused what it's supposed to be doing. I'm going to make this 10, just make it a little bit smaller. There we go. Now let's say you want to take this style and copy that. Well, the easiest way to do it is just simply go in here and yes, good old copy and paste. It's probably the fastest, easiest way of doing that. We're going to take this combo box here and I'm going to show you, hey, how to put items in there and how to tell when those items have changed. And if you kind of hunt and peck through this interface over here, you're not going to see any sort of real helpful, intuitive way of doing this. You're going to kind of fumble through all this and go, well, how do I put things in here? Well, really what you need to do is flip over to the text editor. And I'm actually going to go into the bigger version. That way it's easier to see. Here's that combo box. And we're going to add a model. So yes, we are working with a model view control. Say pizza, steak, and let's call this pasta. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Now I want to know when that changed, and there's multiple ways of do this. Some people are just adamant that you select the control, then you go to the connections and you hit this little guy here, but then you got to either do it in the interface or you go into the text editor here and then you do it down here. The problem with using a connection is if you delete that combo box, you say, I don't want anymore, your connection's most of the time going to stay there. Sometimes it'll disappear automatically. Most of the time it stays right there. So I tend to not favor doing that. I tend to actually do it right here in the actual code. And we're going to say on current text changed, or are we? Let's fix that. There we go. And we're going to say LBO food dot text and we want current text. Save and run. Ridiculously simple to work with here. Now let's work with something a little bit more complex. If you remember, let me pull up the example here. We are able to put people with their age and we're able to add people. So what we're really doing is we're building our own custom data model. It's actually called a list model. And it gets a bit complex, but let's look at it. So we're going to say list model. Under the hood, this is actually being converted to a list model. We're going to give it an ID. And it's filled with list elements. Those list elements, we can have properties. And I'm going to say Brian and add another property. Let's call this age. This could be called anything we want. We call it fuzzy bunny slippers. We could call it I heart cats, whatever we want. But we're just going to, through the magic of copy and paste, do this. And let's say Tammy. And the dog's name is Rango. And we can't have a 45-year-old dog because that'd be a very old dog. So he's only 15, but he's still kind of an older dog. And a lot of people go, I figured it out. They save, they run, and there's nothing there. I don't know if the video is picking it up, but you can see it's highlighting there are 3 items there, but nothing's being displayed. And this gets a little frustrating. And this is typically when people go into Stack Overflow and go, what the heck? What you need to do is go in here. Because we made a custom list model, you need to define a text role. And you notice IntelliSense is not helping us. And we just need to say the name of the property in the list element that it's supposed to pick up. So save and run. Suddenly it's displayed and we have items in here. We could name that anything we want. For example, we could say name. As long as that text role aligns with an actual property, it will display just fine. I'm going to flip this back to text just so it's pretty self-explanatory. Now I want to say, all right, I want to know when the index changed. I'm going to scroll down so we have some real estate here. And current index change. I'm going to show you how to pull information out of that model. And I'm going to say LBL people dot text equals, and we're going to say model dot get, and we want to get the current index. So where am I getting this from? Well, this is the model right here. So we're just saying combo box, give me your model, which is this guy. And then current index is actually a property of the on current index change. It gets a little confusing, but basically you got to read the documentation. Or if you're ever confused, you just hit Control Space. And if that doesn't help, you just start typing and you see, well, there we go. Typically, it'll be like current index change. So whatever this is usually what you're hunting for. That's one thing I really don't care for too much about QML is sometimes it gets a little confusing about what you're actually looking for and you got to go diving into the documentation. But anyways, now because we have the model, we're going to get the current index. Let's just say this is our current index. We want to get a specific property. We're going to say the text. And let's also get the age. And then through the magic of copy and paste, we can just grab this. And at the very end here, I'm going to change that to age. So it's going to say model text, model age. Save and run, see what that looks like. And sure enough, it's already doing it, but bang, bang. Now let's make this editable and see how we can actually put items in there. This gets a bit more advanced, and I'm going to just level with you. I thought about not doing this just because it will raise some questions. First things first, I'm going to set the current index to 2 just because I feel like it. Save and run, show you how that works. There we go. Notice how it didn't fire off the selection. So like it didn't do that. So you can do something like that if you want. But to add, it's actually very, very simple. We're going to say on accepted. And let's go ahead and add that in there. And I'm going to drop this down here actually. But before we can really fire that bad boy off, we need to make sure this is editable. Pretty self-explanatory what that does. It means we can edit this list model. So unaccepted is when we've edited something and we're going to put it in here. And this gets a little bit involved. What we're going to do is we're going to say if find, and we want to find the edit text. The edit text is a string that's being passed to us, and we want to say if it's a -1, meaning it just simply didn't find it, then let's go ahead and add it. And we're going to say model.append, and let's go ahead and add this in. Now, the problem is we can't just say name or anything like that. We have to actually give it in the same format that it's looking for. And this gets a little bit frustrating. This causes some confusion. So basically, all you need to do is, you guessed it, grab this, paste it in there. We have our format, and then we just need to wrap it around and tell it exactly what it's trying to do here. So I'm going to say select that, double quote, and now let's change this to a comma. Select that, press double quote, and we can say edit text, and I'm just going to give it a default age of 0 because we're creating it today. Pretty simple. And then let's go ahead and go current index equals find, and we're going to say edit text, meaning what we're going to do now is we're going to move to the index of the item we just added. Seems a little confusing, but let's go through this again. So when we accept, meaning when they hit enter on the keyboard, we're going to say, hey, does that already exist? If not, then model append, add it to the end, this, and then current index equals, and we're going to go ahead and find that text we just added. We're not moving to the end of the model because that model could be sorted in the view, meaning this may not necessarily be at the bottom. It might actually be at the top. All right, let's save this. Let's run it. You notice how graphically now this is different. It's actually highlighted so we can go in and edit it, but it still functions. And let's go ahead and add Bob. Now, as soon as I hit enter, it's going to add Bob, and it's going to navigate to it, and there's the 0 we put in. And Bob now exists in the list. Pretty cool. This video, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to cover, first off, the delay button. But I'm going to show you some bugs in Qt Creator itself and show you actually how to crash Qt Creator. So first things first, delay button, super simple. It's a button, and when you click it, it makes a progress. And if you get to 100%, boom. So why do we need a delay button? It's pretty simple, actually. Let's say you had something called delete everything, and the user clicks it, and they go, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You want to give them the opportunity to kind of back out. And I just stumbled on the word opportunity. That's right. This is going to be one of those end-to-end videos where you're going to see every mistake I make because I'm intentionally going to crash this thing. So when you see boom done on the screen, you know we've crashed it. I'm going to put that in the background, and let's rock and roll on this. I'm going to go to design. I'm going to go to form editor, imports, and I want controls. Add that in, and I'm going to really rapidly build up this interface. Row, drag drop, scale that, and I'm going to go here. Again, I'm not going to really take a whole lot of time on this because we've explained this, and I'm going to grab that delay button. Drag drop, need a label. Drag drop. I want to take this row. I want to increase that spacing. I want big spacing, so I'm going to say 25. And that label, I want to beef him out a little bit. He's a little wimpy. Let's make him big and tough. So I'm going to say I want 25 and make him bold. Boom. Stat us. And I love this editor because it's so easy. It's so fluid. Everything just works. And we can do some really cool things very rapidly. However, like everything man-made, it does have its bugs. For example, if I take this row and I kind of go like this, you see the button will float underneath the label. So it goes beyond the scope of these tutorials, but when we get into intermediate land, you'll really hear me talk and gripe about different display sizes and how to actually build your interface correctly. So someone would argue, this is not a bug with Qt, this is a bug with our programming. And they'd be right, but at the same time, we're trusting this editor to figure that out. Now, from this point forward, you're going to see me save a lot because I'm going to intentionally kill this thing. And I'm going to scale that out a little bit. So I'm going to show you the first bug. And the first bug is that you do not always trust this little connections editor. You'll hear other instructors go, use the connections editor. Always use a connection. Always. And they really harp on that. So let's try it. I'm going to say new. Oh, well, I got the wrong target. That's an easy fix. I'm going to say delay button. And I don't want to do on clicked. I want to do on activated. That's when we actually get to the 100% mark. All right. So got that. That's not a big deal. I'm going to save my work. And I'm going to add another one. Again, wrong one. That's a little frustrating. Delay button. I want something called on progress changed. And, well, just kind of go through here. I'm not seeing it. So it's just not there. Okay, let's go ahead and just on progress change. The documentation said it was there, and it took it. All right. I don't want print. And now my mouse doesn't want to grab that. Oh, now suddenly it magically starts working. You see how it gets a little buggy here. All right, well, let's just continue on. Now I'm going to save this because I am going to crash this here in a second. I don't want to lose all this work. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change this. All right, so I'm going to grab him, right-click, open connections editor. You see I haven't used this a whole lot, and there's a reason for it. But I'm going to say, all right, let's go ahead and let's be a little smart about this. I'm going to say label.text, and we want this to be the progress notice IntelliSense is not helping us out, the progress of this button here. So go ahead and hit OK. Well, everything worked. Let's save and run and see if this works. Nope. Nope. Maybe we're going too fast. So let's click him. I know what's going on, but I'm just kind of goofing around right now. We're going to make this go really, really slow, right? Save, run. Nothing's happening. Why isn't anything happening? I don't understand. Oh no. Connections have betrayed us. On progress changed. It's in the connections. I'm actually going to comment this out. And I'm going to go up here where I usually do things and literally paste in the same code and rerun this. Suddenly it's working, but it's this weird giant number. So let's go ahead and fix that. And I'm going to say, all right, let's go label dot text equals math dot round, and then we want the progress, and we're going to get a very small number, so we want to multiply that by 100, so it's a larger number. Save. Like I said, I'm going to crash this thing, and I don't want to lose work, so the crash isn't going to happen just yet, but you'll see it. Now we get our nice smooth progress. Interesting. So connection was not smart enough to figure out that that's actually going to be there. Oh, that's frustrating. All right. You know what? You're sitting in class, and the instructor's like, always, always, always use this. And I'm going to show you right now why you shouldn't. We got this little on-activated thing. Surely this has to work, right? We're going to open that connections editor, and we're going to change this. We're going to say label.text equals done. Hit OK. This will work. Mark my words, this part will work. It'll get up to 100%, and then it'll say done. Ta-da! Now the instructor says good. Now change this to say boom. Well, I'm going to move that out. Remember, when you see this screen, and I'm going to actually move it off down to the lower right so you know it's the screen, that means we've crashed. So I'm going to go back here, right click. Actually, I'm going to save because this is going to kill it. Anyways, right click, open connection editor. All right, so add a new line. Well, I'm going to hit return, and what the heck? What's going on here is this is set by default, so when you hit enter, boop, it hits this OK button. Same thing as clicking that. All right, well, I'm smarter than the editor, so I'm going to actually go, yes, very smart of me. Good day, sir. We are going to make this happen. And I'm going to say text equals boom. All right, now I'm going to actually save it, and yep, you guessed it. We just crashed Qt Creator. What just happened? Well, let's open this thing back up here at the speed of my little virtual machine. All right, let's open this up and do a postmortem of what we just did here. And this is a good case study on why not to do this. Notice how it didn't take that at all. We didn't lose any work because I've been saving it. Well, that is frustrating. So someone out there is going to go, why don't you use these little brackets? All right, let's crash it again. We're going to go into Designer. It's still there. We're going to right click. We are super smart. We're going to do this. We're going to cut him, add those brackets, go bang, and text equals boom. And let's save, see what happens. Oh, it actually took it that time. Open connection editor. Let's try that again. This time I'm going to hit enter, and wow, it took it. It didn't actually crash. Now, when I did this previously and I was testing, it crashed, and it crashed hard. And Qt Creator actually didn't want to restart. I was kind of embarrassed. So let's see if that works. Dum, 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 dum. Need some music. Boop. No, it didn't work. That didn't change. Frustrating. So this is actually working, but now we should actually say target.text. See if that works. Now it suddenly works. Okay. I'm really surprised we didn't crash it again, but that's typically why I won't work with a connection. I'll do it up here because A, it will start basically forgetting what is there, and it's kind of funny actually. And B, you'll have to start going, okay, well actually I want this object, because if you just did text, it's trying to change the text of the connection, not the text of the target. Oh, that is super frustrating. So I'm going to grab this guy, comment him out. So if you ever get a know-it-all instructor and they're just kind of being rude, just show them this video. Say, ah, dude, look, you can kill Qt Creator. Again, unfortunately, that's not something you can readily reproduce on every single thing. I'm on Linux Mint. This ran fine on Windows. On my Mac, it didn't even make it half through this tutorial. All right, I'm going to finish this up. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to say progress is 0. Then I'm going to say text. And we're going to say delete everything. And then I'm going to say label dot text. So really what we're doing is we're just resetting this whole thing. And I'm going to change that delay. Again, you can watch right over here as I change it. You'll see it change over there. There we go. Save, run. Let's move this up. Boom. And if I click it again, resets the whole thing. So really the big takeaways from this is the delay button is actually a really cool but yet really simple little component that gives the user graphical feedback, and we can hook right into that progress. But also, more to the point, we can very easily kill Qt Creator on some operating systems. So we got to be a little careful, and that's why you won't see me down here in the connections pane too much. All right, let's take a look at a very, very simple example. I think the last few videos probably made your brain hurt a little bit. So we're going to dial it back just a bit. Get it? Dial it back. No pun intended. We're going to talk about the dial. All right. So bad joke. I know I shouldn't quit my day job. Let's just jump into the designer here. Go into imports. And that was my really, really lame attempt at humor. So I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to drop a column in here. And I'm going to just go here and here. And let's go ahead and go to layout, bang, bang. We're going to scale that out just a smidge. I want to put a label in here. And let's put a dial. Now, if you're sick of watching me type in here, you can 100% just scroll down, go to the Qt Quick Controls, and then hunt and peck for what you're looking for. But sometimes it can get a little cluttered, and they give all these icons these kind of bland monochrome colors, so it gets kind of confusing. Like, is that the dial? Is that the dial? Yeah, I mean, you can kind of hunt and peck around in here sometimes. So the filter is very helpful. Anyways, drag and drop. There we go. Grab him. I want to actually put a lot of spacing in here. I mean, like miles and miles apart. There we go. Grab our label. I want to move him there. And let's bold him. Let's actually make this thing a little bit bigger. Boom. Huge label. And we can actually grab him and move him there too. I don't know why I keep saying him. Don't know if these are male or female. I don't think it really matters. All right, so we've got our value, we've got our dial. We're just going to wire those two up. Going to click him. Doesn't matter where I click him. Here, bang. On clicked. No, we want on moved. Usually what you want is the first option, and if you don't see it and you got to start scrolling down looking for it, it's usually not in there. I'm just going to be very blunt with you. This little connections thing, I kind of griped on it in the last video. We have a definite love-hate relationship. And whenever I work in this, you'll hear me go click, click. That's me saving my work because it has crashed on me numerous times like we've already discussed, and it has betrayed me. All right, so let's do this. And I'm going to say label dot text. I'm being very brave here, and I'm trusting this thing. And honestly, for little one-liners like this, it's 99% of the time you're fine. The problem really comes in when you start doing any sort of complex JavaScript, or if you try doing multiple lines, that's when you'll start running into problems and Qt Creator will crash. But once in a while, and I'm going to copy this, once in a while you'll have a nice little one-liner like this, you'll hit OK, and Qt Creator goes boom. So let's save, let's run, let's test this out. Oh, wait a minute. Come on, what's going on now? Let's go in here and let's see what's going on. So we've got our dial. Why isn't that working? On move, label text equal math round. Everything should be working. When in doubt, let's take this, comment this out, and see what's going on here. You can tell we've got the right IDs because it's going to highlight and ... I'm willing to bet this is the culprit. We should use target. So if we just say dial, notice, they're misspelled. That's what's going on. The IDs have betrayed us. So embarrassing. There we go. What I'm trying to illustrate here is the simplest little things can throw you way off, and that's another reason why I really don't trust this guy, even though it was my fault. And if I take this and actually switch these around and correct it, but you see how it really didn't tell us what was going on. Let's comment this out and actually deep dive into this. So I'm going to comment that out, uncomment this, save, run. And this is one of the things that's my little pet peeve. Application output flashed 3 times, but if you weren't paying attention, you completely missed it. Now it's working in the connection because we have the right ID. So let's go to app output. Let's see. All right, let's close this. And let's close the rest of these. Let's just kill everything. Force quit. Another little pet peeve of mine. And I'm going to flip these around again. And I'm going to say AI, Dale, instead of dial. Again, app output flashed, but we don't really get anything graphically saying, hey, bud, you screwed up. Instead, it just no worky. And, it's flashing again. There we go. Reference error, Dale not defined, but it doesn't even give us a line number. Oh my gosh, that just makes you want to rip your hair out. Joke's on you, I'm bald. I don't have any hair. Anyways, when in doubt, you're in connection land, use a target. Like that. Save, run. Now it should work. If you rip that target out of there and you are just hoping and praying that it will automatically shove the value to the dial, you would be sadly mistaken. Nope, no worky. So some of the little caveats, I will hopefully try to stop griping and complaining about this. If Qt company, if you're watching this, please, if you improve one thing, improve this. So leads to the question, which is the correct way? Should you do it inline in the component or down in the connections? Some people swear by these connections. They say they get performance gains and anything like that, and that it cures cancer and that the sun and moon and stars rotate around it. No, it doesn't matter. Honestly, from an old programmer like me, it does not matter. 100% does not matter. Unless you have a specific use case where you need specific connections and you need to be able to enable and disable those connections. 9 times out of 10, I'll do it inline. That way, if I delete the dial, I don't have to worry about deleting the connection, and I don't have any crazy goofiness like what we just described. This video, we're going to talk about the frame. Now, before you go, nope, not watching this and skipping off, we're going to actually also introduce what's called the pop-up, because the frame is just simply this graphical little rectangle. It's really boring. It does not do a whole lot. It's just a container. But I want to show you that you can do some pretty cool things. So this is the pop-up. Let's figure out how this thing works. All right, so we're going to go into Design, Imports, Qt Quick Controls. I may just start doing that automatically just to save that little step. All right, so first things first, we need a frame. So if we look for frames, we're not going to see it right off the bat. We got to kind of really scroll and look for this thing. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. Grab it, drag, drop. All right, so I'm going to go into our form editor here. Layouts, I want to actually just bang, bang. And I'm going to drop a column in there. And you notice immediately the column is going way outside of that frame. See, there's our column. And there's our frame. Column, frame. So again, our little buddy Clippy here could come back to haunt us. So I'm going to take this column and I'm going to fill the parent. Ta-da! Now it looks beautiful. If it doesn't look like that when you're working, be very afraid of that little clip. And I'm going to take spacing and say 25. Frame. Now when I scale this, our column scales with it. All right, enough goofing around. Let's get to work here. So I'm going to take some checkboxes. Remember, we don't want the delegate because we're not working with a model view. We just want the checkbox, and I'm just going to drag and drop a few of these. So I'm going to say, let's do 2 more. And let's do a button as well. Looks nice and beautiful. I can grab this frame and scale that the way I want it. Pixel perfect, just how I want it. This little guy, I'm going to say this one is buttery goodness. So that's butter. This one is going to be syrup, S-Y-R-U-P. I can never spell syrup. I don't know why. It's just one of those things, and I probably misspelled it already. Fruit, and we're just going to leave this button. Actually, let's call it save. It's not actually going to save anything, but now we want to make a pop-up. Let's go ahead and look in here, and we're going to say pop. Uh-oh, there's no pop-up. Well, what the heck? That is just rude. All right, so pop-up is a non-visual, so we're going to have to go into non-visual land, and I'm going to actually pop right out to the big editor here. All right, so I got the link here for frames, but we're going to talk about the pop-up. And I'm just going to say, and let's call this ID pop-up. Very descriptive, I know. And then what we want to do now is actually build an interface inside the pop-up. But we want to do a few other things first, right? So we're going to say anchors, center in, parent. The parent for that pop-up is going to be the window. And we want to set a few other things like the width and height. So we say width, height, and let's just do 200. I want to keep this kind of super simple. And we're going to say modal. And what that means is when this thing pops up, you cannot interact with anything else. If you're familiar with GUI concepts, you understand what that means. But basically, as soon as that thing opens up, you can't touch any other part of the application. It has 100% of the user's attention. And we want to focus it in case, well, we have any like mouse or keyboard activity, which we're going to need if it's modal because they want to be able to either click out or escape out of it. Now, we want to set what's called a close policy, meaning we want to be able to tell the pop-up, when are you actually allowed to close? Close policy, we're going to say pop-up, and we're going to say close on escape, or, that's what that little pipe is, or pop-up dot, and we want close on press outside of parent. And you see there's other things too, like release, but we want press outside parent. So really what that means, if we hit the escape button or we click off somewhere, it's going to close this pop-up. Oh boy, that is crazy. All right, so let's actually build an interface in here, and we can actually cheat a little bit here and just grab this column, put him in there, and now it's got most of what we need. Need a different ID, so I'm just actually not going to put an ID in there, and I'm going to get rid of these. And I'm going to say label, and this is going to be ID, and this is going to be LBO butter. Let's jump over to the designer and see what that looks like. It's hidden. Very frustrating the way that works. So usually what I'll do, if you wanted to actually work on the designer, is I'll actually build all of this that we're doing now graphically on the screen and then copy and paste it in. But I'm being a little brave, and I'm just going to do it this way. And I'm going to say, let's give these some names here, like CHK butter, CHK SYRUP. I don't know why. I've never been able to spell syrup. And then let's call this CHK fruit. Now, LBL butter, we're going to say the text of this is going to be the status of, you guessed it, our little checkbox. And then we can just simply take this, copy paste, just banging these out pretty quick. Should be self-explanatory what I'm doing. And then I'm going to rename these. All right. Also, we want a button in here. We want to be able to actually close this thing. So we're going to add a button. Don't really need an ID, but I'm just going to put it in here. Close button, text, and we're just going to simply say close. And let's go ahead and say on clicked. And we're going to say pop-up dot. Now we could do close. We could also do dot visible equal false. Let's try both and see what happens here. So I'm going to leave it with pop-up visible equal false. And we're going to just take this little guy here, scroll way down, go here, and we're going to say pop-up visible equal true. So when we click the bottom button, it's going to open the pop-up. In the pop-up, we can say visible false, and let's just run this. So true, true, false, and bang, closes. Good. And we can also just click off. Notice how it's not working. But we can hit the escape key. Let's look at this. Let's look at our close policy here. And we're going to say close on press outside, and let's see if that works. This is one of the few things that I've had trouble with. Now that magically works. So we're just clicking off here and it works. So why didn't it work initially? Because we said close on press outside parent. So if this was not modal, we could click on the parent and then it would close this. In theory, I have not always seen it work that way. So let's actually change this around. I'm going to say pop up, close, and on clicked, we're going to say pop up and open. Let's see the difference between the two here. Save run. We'll do butter and fruit because everybody wants to put butter on their fruit. It's the cool thing. And it works. True, true. So what's really the difference here? Actually, not much. Which one should you use? Honestly, scoping through the documentation, realistically, you should do pop-up open and pop-up close. You can use visible, but you're going to have some unpredictable results. I wanted to mention both of those because I've seen both of these used out in the wild, and some people swear that they're the exact same thing. And honestly, they may actually function identical. But when in doubt, follow the documentation, which is open and close. This video, we're going to talk about the group box, which is this frame with a little title, and the radio button. We're also going to add a little bit of JavaScript here. One thing to note before we begin, though, the radio button is a lot like the checkbox in the sense that you can actually click it and it does some sort of check, but it works independently of other radio buttons in the same container. Let's see how this thing works. All right, so we're going to go here, design. Let's go ahead and add that in, and we're going to say Q-Quick Controls. First things first, I want to add in a row. Let's drop that down there. I'll scale this a little bit here. And let's grab this little guy. Let's move him around. There we go. We may have to scale this a little bit more. And I'm going to say group, drag drop. Now looking at the group box, it's actually very simplistic. It's pretty much just a frame with a title. So we can just type in whatever title we want. And in this case, I'm going to say food. Ta-da! I'm going to give this some spacing here. And I want to add some radio buttons in here. So let's go. And again, similar to the checkbox, you have a button and a delegate. Remember, the button is what you'd work with directly. A delegate would go into model view programming, which we touched on a little bit. So let's just drag and drop some buttons in here. And right off the bat, you notice, oh, it's not going to stack them down. Why? Because we need another layout. Oh, that is so frustrating. So let's go ahead and right click, and I'm just going to show you how to delete those. Let's go ahead and drop another layout. I'm going to do a column here. And again, the column's just going to automatically go out of bounds. Very frustrating how it does that. So I'm going to say column. Let's go into layout. I'm going to fill the parent. There we go. Now let's do our radios. Remember to get the radio button, not the delegate. And we're going to drop it into the column. And now it will actually scale those down. We can space these out if we want to. I really don't have any spacing though. Going to grab our group box, and you notice how those little grab handles suddenly disappear. That can be a little bit frustrating. So I'm going to manually type that in. 150, bang. Let's go ahead, save, and let's run. Let's see what this looks like. And you can see right off the bat how it's actually not a one-for-one. What you see is what you get. We have this has scaled on us, and it has betrayed us. So let's figure this out a little bit here. Let's put this back at 200. And it seems a little bigger than it should be. Save and run. And it is. But it's not as drastic. If we line these up, they actually do not match. You can see right across. That is where our little buddy, the preview, will come in super handy. We don't have to go through the entire compilation step. It'll just take this QML and show us what it looks like. So unfortunately, when the designer does this, you have to kind of guesstimate. You could, if you really wanted to, do something like this and then size it appropriately, meaning drop an anchor on the bottom of the group box. I'm going to just kind of try to guesstimate here. I'm going to say 190 and save and run. And it's acceptable. I'll take it. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to make another one, and this one's going to be called drinks. So we can either go into the text editor and copy and paste, or we can actually just right click, edit, and we're going to copy. And I'm going to drop that down, select this, right click, edit, and paste. I'm doing this right on the row. If we did it on this other group box, it's going to make it a child. So I want it to be a child of the row. Ta-da, there it is. Takes everything one for one. I can go in here. I can say group box. Let's call this drinks. There we go. And now I want to name these things. So this is going to be fish. And this is going to be, let's give this an actual ID here. Let's give this an ID as well. Let's call this steak. Give this a title of steak. And let's give this, let's call this Art-Yo Vegan. Sometimes the designer lags a little bit, but that's okay. Once the designer's caught up, we can just keep going. So let's go here, and I'm going to say we need some drinks here. So let's call this water. Wine, because everybody likes wine. Why not? And let's grab this, and we're going to say soda or pop, depending on where you live. Some people call it cola, some people call it Coke. Almost done, so we're going to take a button here. And we're just going to drag and drop. Now, that little guideline will help us out a little bit, but it's not perfect. So what I typically do is I'll go into the layout and I'll actually drop an anchor. And we are very close. It moved just a smidge. Let's take a look at what we got here. So we have no spacing in there. Let's go ahead and drop 5 spacing in there. And then let's expand this one out, grab that, and drop a 5 spacing in there as well. Just to kind of space those out, give a little bit of extra room. Save and run. Let's see what this looks like. Pretty darn good, and right out of the box, these work independently based on their container. Again, we have a group box, and you may be fooled into thinking that the layout is the container. That's not always true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I've noticed from version to version of QML, the radio button's behavior has switched from the actual layout to the group box. So be a little cautious about that. Newer versions, it's almost always whatever it's directly a child of. But I think very early versions, I noticed some weird bugs where it was trying to go up another level. So I'm going to click on our button. I'm going to save because our little connections editor down here is super, super awesome sometimes, and it does crash. So now that we've got this, I'm going to flip over into code view. What I want to do now is I want to actually make a pop-up here. So I'm going to go up. Remember, pop-up is non-visual, so the designer's really not going to help us out. I'm going to say ID pop-up, anchors, and we're going to center in the parent. And let's just give this a width of, let's say, 200, height of 200. I really don't care what this looks like. I'm just showing you for illustrative purposes. I'm going to say modal true. Whipping this out as fast as we can. Focus true because we want to be able to get keyboard input. And we're going to say close policy. Remember, we got to have that. And we're going to simply say pop up, close on escape, or pop up. And we want close on press outside. So basically, if it presses anywhere outside of this pop-up, we want to be able to close the pop-up automatically. Now I'm going to just add a column. IntelliSense has betrayed us. And let's go ahead and anchors fill. We're going to fill up the parent, which in this case is the actual pop-up. I'm going to say spacing, and this is going to be 25. And let's just drop into components. We're going to put in a label, and we're going to put in a button. So I'm going to say label. And text. I'm just going to leave it like there for now. And let's do a button. Now, one fun fact, you can actually flip into the designer, go to text editor, and though we are in the pop-up, you can click on this button. You can click on the label, and you notice how you can actually use the property editor even though this is a non-visual component. So if I switch back to button, it will detect that it's a button. And I can go in here and call this, and it puts the ID right in the button. So if you're more comfortable with the property editor, You can use that, or you can flip right into the code and use that. Doesn't really matter which way you do it. And we're going to say text of this button is going to be close. And let's go ahead and do the onClicked. Editor was being super helpful there for a minute. Now remember from the previous video, I do popup.close. Some people actually do visible equals false, which is the correct way. Honestly, documentation can be a bit misleading. Some documentation says use one, some documentation says use other. The one I typically follow is actually calling the method. All right, so we got our little pop-up. Let's go down to our connection. And like I said, I often don't use connections because they can be a little cumbersome. I'm just showing you how you can do this. Target is the button, and onClicked is what we want to work with here. So we're going to make a bit of JavaScript. Haven't really covered JavaScript, and I promise we are going to cover that. I got an entire section queued up ready to go where we're going to actually cover some of the basics of JavaScript. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the food. So I'm going to say for var I equals 0, and this is just a standard for loop. If you're familiar with C++, which you should be, then basically you're going to know what we're doing here. I want to actually grab these columns here. So this guy, let's call this call food, call him call drinks, or just drink. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab these individual columns that have the radio buttons in them, and we're going to get the children. So this is very reminiscent, if you know anything about Qt widgets, you have a parent-child relationship, and we can actually extract those children. So we're going to say call food. Did I misspell that? No, I didn't. All right, IntelliSense just didn't want to help us out there. And we're going to say I++. So we're just going to go through all of those children. So var in the JavaScript world just stands for variable. It's just kind of like a random object or any sort of generic object. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to say call food. Actually, yeah, dot children. And let's go ahead and go here. And I do want to stop for one quick second and go all the way up to the top. We're going to make a couple properties for that pop-up here. I'm just showing you that we can access these properties from outside of the pop-up. So we're going to say string, and let's call this str drink. Let's give this a blank value. So we've got a string drink and a string food. We're going to work with those back down here. So basically what we're doing is we're going through that column's children, which are those radio buttons, and we're going to get that as just an object. We don't really have to do any sort of casting. This is actually one of the really kind of cool things about JavaScript. I personally am not a JavaScript fanatic, but it does have its uses. We don't have to do any sort of casting. We can just say, okay, work with the object. So if it's checked, then we're going to say str food, that property we just created, equal the RDO.text. Very, very simple. And we can just, through the magic of copy and paste that out, and we're going to change this to call drink. And then notice how we get some warnings where it's saying I is declared more than once. We really don't care. This is perfectly fine because we're not manipulating the value. Meaning I'm not setting this to like some special number and then trying to reset it down here. So it's not going to goof up our code. If you're super, super worried about it, you could change it to like H or something like that. Does not really matter, to be brutally honest with you. And then once we've got all of this, let's just go ahead and say pop up. And we're going to go ahead and pop that pop-up open. So to recap here, save run, we're going to be able to select, and then when we click this, it's going to run that JavaScript and pop it up. We're not quite done yet, almost, but not quite. So what we want to do now is go up into our pop-up, and we're going to say we want to display what they're going to do. So this person is going to have this food with that drink. Now, why are we using properties and we're not actually adding them down here? Personal preference, doesn't really matter. You could have very easily put these properties in the pop-up and then just called pop-up.str drink or whatever you wanted to do. Personal preference, I'm just putting them up here. Save and run, and let's see this work. So I want steak with wine. Ooh, we goofed up. Wine with. Let's see what's going on here. Ah, yes, the infamous goof up. str drink. Let's fix this really fast. So this time I want fish with water. Or actually, let's go vegan with water. And I'm vegan with water. We could do fish with soda, which is a really gross combination. Or we could do steak and wine. So some takeaways from this. The group box is a container. However, the radio button will not go off the group box. It will go off the actual parent, in this case the columns. And we've got a bit of JavaScript we've worked with. Okay, this video, we are going to talk about the slider. It's actually very simple, but also very cool. There's two flavors of a slider. There's a range slider and a normal slider. We're going to be covering the normal slider, although technically both of them are range sliders because you have a start and a stop position. The difference is the normal one just goes from the start to stop, where the range has two little bubbles, and you can do a cross section or a subsection of this range right here. It gets a little bit more confusing. I've already got the Qt controls imported. I'm going to flip over to Designer. I'm going to drop a grid in there. So let's go grid. Grab this grid. I want this to have at least 2 columns. And I'm going to resize this to suit our needs. I want that to be fairly thin by fairly long. And I'm just going to center that. Actually, whoops, there we go. Actually hit the fill parent on accident there. And let's go ahead and grab our slider. Here's what I was talking about. Here's the range slider, and it's got the little 2 dots. We want the normal slider. Technically, they're both range sliders because they go between a range, but we won't get into that argument. Let's make this 300, and we have a value, a from, and a to. And this is what I was talking about with the range. We're going from to. And this is a decimal, so it's going from 0 all the way to 1, so 0 to 100%. Step is how many numbers it jumps as we move this little handle, this little bubble here. Snap is going to determine how often this thing will snap to a value. It's kind of confusing. Let's add in a label here. And let's just real quickly bang this thing out. Spacing, I'm going to put 25 for spacing. I'm going to beef this label up super quick just so it stands out. And I'm going to say 25. And there we go. We're going to grab this guy, and we want its current value to be 0.00. There's a few different ways we can do this. First way, we can grab this label, and we can say we want this text to be slider value. It's now bound. Save run. Let's see what happens. Notice how it's this ginormous number. We could do, math round. What we could also do is we could reset that, and we could go down to our buddy the connections pane, which has betrayed us in the past. We've seen how that will crash on us. And because I don't fully trust this, I'll flip over to the text editor, and I'm going to say onMoved. And there's different ones we could have done. So we could have, let's just kind of see here, tons and tons of things. I'm just going to do onMoved, and let's go ahead and turn this into a little bit of JavaScript here. We're going to say label.text equals math.round slider value times 100. Very easily could have done the same thing up in that little binding right here. Does not really matter which way you do it. Some people like to do it via binding. Some people like to do it via connections. Some people like to do it via inline, where it's actually up here, which we've typically done in the past. Just showing there's multiple ways we can do this. Save, run. Let's see this in action. Let's talk about step real quick. You notice how this is going every single number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up. Grab our slider. We're going to go to step, and let's say this is going to go every 10th. Step size, save, run. Notice how now it's going every 10th. If you have the step size and you're not seeing it actually step, you may need to actually rebuild your project, because sometimes Qt gets lazy and it doesn't want to rebuild it even though it should. It just, for whatever reason, thinks nothing's changed. This video, we're going to talk about the range slider. This is a little bit different than the slider. The slider, you only had one little bubble. The range slider allows you to, well, select a range within a larger range. So in this case, we're going from 0 to 100, and the user can select any sort of range in between. Let's take a look at this. Let's go into Design, go to Imports, add controls, whatever version you want to do. We're going to drop a column in here, and I want to kind of scale this around. And let's go ahead and center that in the parent. We're going to take this range slider, drop that in there, and I want a label. Drop that label in. We're going to take that white line right between the two so we know exactly where it snaps, but it didn't do it. So let's try that again. There we go. Now let's take both of these, and we're going to try and snap these into the center. Let's see what happens here. You notice how one went and the other didn't. Let's undo it, redo it. That is frustrating. So what's going on under the hood? We have a small bug here. We have multiple selected, but only one of them is moving. Frustrating. All right, so let's go here. Let's take that label, snap that over, and then let's modify this thing. And I'm going to say X to Y. And let's go ahead and make this a bit bigger. And let's grab him and let's say spacing 25. All right, so pretty simple, pretty easy to understand. We have a first value, a second value, and let me actually move this out. Our range slider selected, we've got first value, second value, from, and to. So first value and second value, these are the actual values the user has selected, where the from and to is the outer range. So think of this as inner range, outer range. And then of course we have the step and the snap mode. Whew, boy, this thing's a little bit more complex. Let's grab this, let's scale that down, and let's make this work. So first things first, we're going to make some connections. Not a big fan of connections as usual, but let's just do it. So I'm going to make 2 of them. And let's take this first one. Let's save my work in case we crash this thing. I'm going to go here and scroll down, see if it's going to give us what we're looking for. And of course not. It would be too easy if that was in there. What we're looking for is on value change, and I'm not seeing it right off the bat unless I'm completely missing it. That's possible, but I'm just not seeing it. Frustrating. All right, so on value changed was not helping us at all. Why? We've got the wrong target. What do you mean we've got the wrong target? We've got the range slider. Nope. We actually want a different target. To do this, we have to jump into the code. See, the target is range slider. We want range slider first. So that's right. The first is an alias. We've talked about property aliases before. And then we want second. That's something you cannot do right out of the IDE. you could go in here and try to actually edit it manually. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. And then let's see if we can select it now. Nope, it's not even doing the properties. I'm clicking away and it's not dropping down any properties at all. So that's one of the shortcomings of this little guy. I know I've harped on him before. Let's jump back into code. So we've got range slider first, range slider second. In case you're wondering, wait, back up. First, second, what are these? Let's go back to design. Let's select our range slider. It's just this, first value, second value. Now, those are aliases for an object inside of this. It's just a property alias. We've done that before. So really, all you need to know is range slider dot first, range slider dot second. Now we can actually work with the value change. So we're going to grab this and we're going to say value changed. And I'm going to say label.text equals, and we're going to do a little bit of math. We're going to say math round, and we're going to say range slider, and then we want to do the first dot value, multiply that by 100, and we're going to say, for those of you that already know JavaScript, you're probably screaming, why aren't you putting this into a function? Well, we can. We're just not going to do it yet because I'm going to cover JavaScript. Not going to cover all of JavaScript, but I'm going to show you enough that you can survive in QML land. And we're going to say range slider, and we want the second dot value times 100 going off the screen. I apologize about that. Pretty simple, pretty easy, just through the magic of copy and paste. We're going to do that for both of those. So why do we need both of these? In case they move the first one or the second one, it's going to update both of them. Very easily could have wrapped this into one function. Save and run. Let's see what this looks like here. So we're going to move the first, we're going to move the second, and we're good to go. So some of the takeaways from this is the range slider allows an inner range from an outer range, and you have to hook into what's called range slider first and range slider second. These are just objects and they're property aliases. We've just shown how to do this before on our own custom components, but just know if you try to do like a range slider first value, you're going to get some sort of null error. This video, we're going to explore the round button. Dramatic effect. It's actually not that exciting. It's just a button, but it's round. But it serves its purpose. Graphically, it just looks like a round button, and it functions exactly the way you think it would. So this will not be a super special long video. Don't expect fireworks or a parade or anything, but let's just dive in very quickly, show you how this thing works. Cute quick controls. And this is becoming old hat by now. We've done this numerous times. We're going to make a row. I'm going to resize this pretty much however we want it. And let's go ahead and plop this in the center here. And I'm going to move that like that. And I want to do, say, round button. There we go. Looks exactly like what it's going to look like when we plop it on here. Notice how it's got these little plus icons. And go in here. They're actually not icons, they're text. And I don't want 25. Let's do 10. There we go. Let's grab a label, drop it in there, bang, and let's make this a little bit bigger. I want that beefier. That way we can actually see what's going on. And let's just say value equals 0. And let's grab this, scale this around. Let's go ahead and grab the second round button, and really it's right here. It's just text. So we're going to do that and that. Now we can actually go in here and go font, and we can beef this up a bit too if we really feel like it. So like I can actually say, let's make this 15 and let's make this 15. Now they're a little more clear what we're trying to do here. Let's go ahead and let's grab these things, and we're going to go actually into the editor here, and I'm going to make a property. We could do this in the property editor if we really felt like it. So we're going to say property, we're going to say var value, and let's make this a 0. Now all we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to say on clicked, and we're going to say value, and this is the minus, so we're going to reduce it, and this is the plus. Whoops, we're actually in the wrong component here. There we go. On clicked, and this is the plus. We're going to say value, and we're going to increment that. And then here we are just going to say, get rid of this. There we go. If you really wanted to, what you could do is you could give this an ID. If you're very, very worried about it, it's already got an ID window, but I'm going to rename it to root just because I want it to be root. And we can say root.value. That way it's not going to get confused if you have any other properties. Save and run. Super simple. Does exactly what you think a button would do. It's just round. In this video, we're going to talk about the spin box, but I'm also going to show you different ways of actually setting this value. The spin box itself is just dead simple. It's 2 buttons. You can get the value out. It just works. It's dead simple. So let's go in here. I've already got the controls imported. Design view. I'm just going to build this super fast. I'm going to say grid. Scale this a little bit. Going to select him. This is going to have 2 columns and with a 25 spacing. Spin box itself, go ahead and drag and drop, and let's put a label in there. Let's beef this label up graphically a little bit. Bold, 25. Whipping through this because we have done this numerous times. All right, so let me grab this grid. I'm going to resize him. Or her. I didn't want to assume the gender of that grid. And then we're going to move it to the center. We can zoom in using Control middle mouse and get this pixel perfect if we want to, but we really don't need to. Save, zoom out. Let's run this. What we're going to do next, we're going to wire up the value change to this label. This is super simple, but there's multiple ways to do it. First off, our buddy connections. Oh, got the wrong target, so I'm going to go down spin box and then value modified. I'm going to save my work because as we've demonstrated, this has a nasty habit of crashing on us, and we're going to move this up here. And we're going to say label.text, and we can say equals spinbox.text, or actually value, sorry. Or we can say target.value. Which way is the right way? It doesn't really matter. Target is the spin box, and spin box points to this guy anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They're both essentially under the hood. If you're thinking in terms of C++, they're basically pointers. Save, run. ... just works. So that's one way of doing it. I'm going to go in, comment out this connection. The alternate way is we can actually do it inline. And we want on value changed. Notice how the connections did value modified. We can do that as well. And we're going to say label.text equals value. Now we don't have to say spinbox.value or target value because target doesn't exist here because we're inline, meaning we can read from this. Going back to our C++ or JavaScript days, those brackets denote scope. So we have full read access to anything in that scope. Save, run. And it works. Last but not least, a good old favorite of just about every graphic designer out there is we can make sure the label's selected, and we can go to the text and click this little octagon and set binding. From here, we can just say, actually we can say spinbox.value. There we go. And hit OK. The little chains appear, which means that is now bound. And as soon as we run, bang, it just works. So 3 methods, but which one should you use and why? Well, honestly, it doesn't really matter. A lot of folks like to do what's called a property binding. That way, they don't really have to mess around with any of this stuff. You'd use an inline right here if you wanted to make sure that when you delete this, everything else is deleted. If you had other things you wanted to do, like if you wanted to do a lot of code, call a lot of functions, that's typically when people will use connections. The major takeaway from this thing is there's multiple ways to link these up, and the spin box itself is just dead simple to work with. This video, we're going to take a look at the switch. It's actually pretty simple, but it's actually pretty cool. Let's take a look. First things first, I'm going to switch to SAD mode, but I'm going to paste some files in here, and these are just simply the images that we're going to use. Going to go in, going to right click, we're going to open this in the editor, add a prefix. We've done this before. Images, add some files, and we're just going to add the 2 files. It irks me that that goes off the screen. There we go. We're just going to add those 2 files. Save that. Should be able to see them. And let's go into design view. Go to our form editor here and import. Let's grab our controls. Scroll down. I'm going to drop a column in here. And the column itself, I want to lay that out. So I want to actually fill the parent on that. And we are going to add an image and a switch. So image, bang, and a switch. Now, again, there's a switch and a switch delegate. Remember, whenever you see delegate, you're thinking model view controller. We're not doing that. We're just doing the normal switch. Ta-da! There we go. Now comes the fun bit. What we're going to do here is we're going to move these around just a little bit here. So I'm going to grab this image, grab this switch, and let's put him there. They're overlining each other, so I don't really want to do that. We're going to take this guy and we're going to modify this margin here. And we're going to say, off the screen. Too much. So how do you figure this out? Notice we're doing this really the hard way here. So I'm going to go bang, get rid of that. It's overlaying. I want to set a bottom anchor. So I'm going to say make sure you got your switch selected, and we're going to say bottom. Now, target is what we're really looking for here. So notice this is parent. As long as you have a valid object, and you see this little line now is showing you, hey, here's your margin. Ah, that's the missing number we've been looking for. It's exactly 220 pixels from there. Well, we don't want a margin that high. We only want it, say, 25 from the bottom. Sometimes the editor is really cool. Sometimes it is not cool. This is an example of it being uncool. So let's drop in and see what's going on here. All right, so we've got anchors bottom, anchors vertical, anchored vertical centers. Oh, anchors everywhere. What the heck is going on here? All right, let's get rid of all these anchors. What I'm demonstrating is that sometimes the form editor likes to betray us. Switch is suddenly back up at 0, 0. Let's figure out what we need to do. So we're going to take the switch. We're going to anchor this to the parent bottom. And I'm going to actually say 0. Notice how suddenly it's working now. It's where we want it to be. And I'm going to give it a margin of 25. Bang. Now it's 25 off the bottom. This is a really good example of how sometimes you can get what I call anchor happy, and you can mix and match these, and the editor gets really, really confused about where you actually want to put it, which is right here. Now I can just simply go bang, and it's exactly where we want it. Oh, that is frustrating. Why does it do that? Why not? That's why it does that. So let's go ahead and change this. We're going to just simply double click and we're going to say sad. It's sad because it's currently off, and I'm going to zoom way in here. And what we're going to do is we're now going to hook into the events here. So when this is toggled, we can switch between sad and happy and change the image. Let's kind of demonstrate what we're going to be doing. Our image is here but invisible, and we're just going to go like this. and hook into that toggle event. We can actually, if you don't want to do a connection, we can go right in here and we can go on toggled, and here's where the fun really happens. We can say if checked. Yeah, that's right. This acts just like a checkbox if it's checked. Super simple, super easy to understand. If it's not checked, then we do something else. So if it is checked, then we're just going to say the text, and IntelliSense is trying to help us out, equals happy. And we want to set the image dot, thank you IntelliSense. Kind of messes you up once in a while when it does that. We say image dot source equals, and then we are going to just grab our happy image by right click, copy the URL. Then we can just grab this, copy paste, bang bang. And let's go here, say sad. And we can actually just copy this and voila. Save run. Now our image is a little bit small, so we're going to want to scale that out. But the base functionality does work. Let's flip back to design view. And let's actually scale him. So I want to do this, say 300 by 300. Make sure we've got room, and I can actually zoom out to make sure that just works. Save run. And there we go. Okay, this video we're going to look at the tumbler. It's this guy right here, and you've probably seen these on like iPhones. Basically, we're going to make a simple lock. So we've got a combination. We're going to check. Nope, it's still locked. All right, so the code for this, I think, if I remember correctly, is 520. Boy, this is a lot easier with your fingers. 529. Unlocked. All right, let's take a look at this, see how to make this work. This is going to be an end-to-end video, so you're going to see every single mistake that I make, and I do make a lot of them, so bear with me. All right, we're going to go in here. We're going to add the controls. Now we need to build up our interface, and our interface is going to be a little bit different, but I think we can suffer through it here. So we can go column, and we're going to take this column. Let's go ahead and just center this. There we go. I'm going to put that out a little bit. I want a label. Now on top of our label, we want to do, I shouldn't say at top, underneath the label. Told you I was going to make a mistake. We want to do a row, because now, there we go. We're going to have this row right under our label. You can see it there. We're going to take our row and we're going to say, I want this to be like 210. I'm just going to pick a number. There we go. I want to actually increase our label. I'm going to back up just a little bit here. I'm getting a little sidetracked. It bothers me when I forget to make the label a little bit bigger. And we're going to actually move this towards the center. There we go. In case you're wondering, there's the center, there's this. So what I want to do with this row is I want to add in our tumblers here. There we go. Got a kind of a weird icon, but I think we can figure it out. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. We got a little bit of extra room here. So we're going to shrink this down. So our width on this row, let's actually go with 190, see if that works. And then I'm going to move this in the center. There we go. And we're going to add a button down here. Drag, drop, bang. And we're going to move him to the center as well. Grab that, bang. I feel like this video should come with sound effects. And let's actually spread these out a little bit. So let's say 25. Maybe a little too much. Let's go 15. I like the way that looks. Let me scale this a little bit. We've got our basic interface, and I'm going to just say 0, 0, 0. Save and run. Well, let's see what this looks like here. So the premise being, as we spin these tumblers, this will change, and when we click a button, we'll be able to tell if it's locked or unlocked. So let's go ahead and let's rename this little guy here. I need a good name for this button. How about the infamous check? There we go. All right. Let's drop into code view, and we're going to start writing some code here. So first things first, I want some properties. So I'm going to say property var, and let's call this lock code. This is the super secret combination that we need. And I'm going to say 529. Special note that this is a string. I didn't do an integer. The reason being, the tumblers, as we move them, we're going to get the string representation, and it will be a 529. And if we'd done an integer and we did something like this, equals 529, it's going to be false because you're comparing types. Where this will do a type conversion in the background, and it will actually cast these to say, hey, do they match? So I'm just going to negate any of that, and I'm going to do this right here and just make that a string. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that. I'll explain that a little better once we get there. So if you didn't get that, don't worry. I'll explain it. So I'm going to say property, mistakes for everybody. Wow. All right. So string, and this is just going to be the status. And we're going to say locked. Now I need a pop-up. So let's say pop-up. It would be super cool if you could actually edit the pop-up in the designer. I know there's certain ways you can do it, but it's a little bit more advanced than I want to get into in this course. So for the purpose of this course, it's a non-visual component. We're going to set the close policy, and we're going to say pop-up dot close on escape, or pop-up dot, and I want to do close on press outside. That way we can either escape or just click off. Width 200. Let's do a height. I have no idea what to make this. Let's make it 300. That way it covers most of those tumblers. Make it so you have to interact with it, and give it focus. That way it'll catch those keyboard events. And let's build a label. This is old stuff, so I'm just kind of whipping through this as fast as I can. Fortunately, the faster I type, the more mistakes I make, but I think you understand what's going on here. And then we're going to center this in the parent. And then text. We're going to say this is the status. And then let's go ahead and bold this font. So we're going to say font. Bold true. And I think we're good there. Now we need to go down to Mr. Button here, and let's make this work. So when we click this button, we want some type of magic to happen, but not so fast. We missed some steps. These tumblers, right? We want to update our status. So when we spin these tumblers, that's actually kind of fun to do. I want this to update. So let's go ahead and do that super, super quick. And I'm just going to say on current index change, that's right. It's just holding an array in the background. We're going to say label dot text equals, and then we're going to build a big old string. I'm going to say tumbler dot current index plus, and we can just some copy and paste action here. And we're going to do tumbler1 current index, and again copy and paste action. Copy and paste is like the best thing ever. All right, so I'm just going to take that whole long thing. That's the technical term for it is thing, and I'm just going to go bang and bangs. Again, once we explore into JavaScript a little deeper, I'll show you, hey, we can just wire a function to all those. It's super simple. And let's go in here. Now we can actually play around with this. I'm going to say onClicked. Let's test our tumblers. I'm a little paranoid. There we go. That's actually kind of neat. It's a lot funner when it's on like a cell phone and you can do this with your fingers, but the mouse still works pretty good. Let's wire this button click up, and let's say var temp code equals, and this is where I want to grab this right here. And I'm going to collapse these down. You notice how I'm saying and an empty string. If I just do it like this, we're going to actually convert that into a number. We could cast that, but this is just a super dead simple way to make sure that turns into a string. There are better ways of doing that. I'm just being extremely lazy. And then we're going to say if, and this is the part you need to pay attention on. This is why I said we're going to do this as a string instead of an integer. So if we say if temp code equals, and then we're going to say lock code, then we want the status. See, it's already complaining. We want the status to be unlocked. Now this seems super simple, but you see it's saying this and this may perform type coercion. So it's coercioning it. Coercioning, is that even a word? Basically, it's saying we're going to make a best guess here. Well, not so fast, right? So let's go in here and let's say status popup dot open. And for the sake of argument, let's change this to an integer. 529. So this should actually work. Save run. We've got this warning. Pay special attention to that. 0, 0, 0. We're going to check. Nope, locked. I actually want to move that around. All right, again, locked. All right, good. Let's do what we know the code is, and we know that code is 529. So I'm going to say 5, 2, a lot easier with your fingers than a mouse, 529. So that's the code, and it's unlocked. It works. Yay. But our new intern comes in and goes, well, you know what? I really want to change it to that. And then they go, you know, maybe I don't. I want to leave it. You're right. The original developer was right. Let's leave it like that. But, oh, I see this warning. Let's do that. I've cleared the warning, and I have fixed the program. Let's run this and see what happens. Special note, this is an integer. We're comparing the integer to a string. Let's give it the actual code of 529. So there's 5, 2, and 9. Still locked. Why? Because now we're not doing that type coercion. JavaScript has come to haunt us. So because we got rid of that, I should say we got rid of that warning by adding this, we need to put this in the right format, which is simply a string. So we're comparing a string to a string. Now this will work. All right, spin the wheel, place your bets. Oh, I almost had it to 5 too. So there's 5, 2, and 9. Unlocked. We're going to build upon the last example, and this is going to be another end-to-end video, so you're going to see every mistake, but we're going to make a simple login screen with username and password. So if we just click it, failed. Let's go ahead and enter the username and the super top secret password. Hello. All right, let's figure this out. Let's go in here, design, imports. I'm going to whip through a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, so we're not wasting a whole lot of time here. So I'm going to go in here and we're going to say, I want a column, bang, and I want to put a grid in that column. So now I've got a grid as the child of the column. Seems a little trippy, but it's actually not too bad. Now inside of my grid here, I'm going to click this. I want to have maximum of 2 columns. And let's make this a 300 by 100. Spacing, let's space these out a little bit. So we're going to say 10. All right, now I want to drop in labels and some text. So I'm going to say labels. Actually, it's right there. drop 2 labels in there. And I want some text fields, so I'm going to say, all right, so text field, drag and drop him right there. Ta-da! And let's grab him and go all the way down to the bottom. A little bit of expert mouse movement there, dragging and dropping him. All right, so we've got that. Let's take our column and let's actually kind of scale this a little bit here. Not going to be super professional about this. We're going to take a button and I'm going to collapse him so you can see it. I'm just going to drag and drop that button. Boom, going to go right down to the bottom. Going to take that, lay it out in the middle, and then take this button, lay him out in the middle. Take our grid, drop him into center. All right, so gonna take this, and what we want to do next is we want to change these labels and change the echo mode here. All right, so let's get rid of this. Bang. Let's go here. Now what we're looking for is echo mode. I don't see it right here, so let's go over to advanced. Usually you can find it in advanced, and if it's just not there, we may have to hunt for it a little bit. I don't think it's in here. I don't think it is. All right, let's go into text editor. Not a big deal. We can figure this out. And I'm going to say echo mode, and I want this text input dot password. There we go. And I'm going to just change this to, and let's go ahead and change the IDs here. So we're going to say so we've got username and password. Flip back to our form designer. Ah, yes. Username. All right. Everything should be good. I'm going to actually recenter this whole thing. There we go. And let's change this to login. Zoom in so you can kind of see the design here. User, password, login. Magic's going to happen in this button, and I'm going to just drop right into code view because we're going to now be playing with some non-visual stuff here. And I'm going to say property, string, let's make this username. And let's say that needs to be Brian. Got a little keyboard happy there. Let's say the password is password, and ironically, this is not the way you would do it in a production app. I'm going to do it here because we're still in beginner land, and I don't really want to have the conversation about hashing and password cracking and things like that. So we're just going to store this right here. But in the real world application, you would pull this credential out of a database remotely off a web server, and it would be actually not even the password, it would be a hash, and then you would hash this in real time. So anyways, that's a much more complex conversation than what we're having here. The current status is failed. There we go. That makes more sense. Now we need to add a pop-in. Pop-up, not pop-in. I was thinking of a completely different language for a moment there. And we're going to say status, pop-up, close policy. By now, I don't think anybody would be offended if I copy and pasted, but I'm not going to do it just yet. So close on escape, and I'm going to say pop-up, close on press outside, anchors. We're going to go ahead and center that in the parent. Width, 200, height, let's go with 300. Modal, let's go ahead and set that to true. That way they have to interact with it. Focus, yes, so it gets keyboard input. And let's add a label. So we're going to say label. I'm going to say status label, anchors, center in parent. Should be very obvious what I'm doing here. We're basically just adding a label, centering it. All right, so we're going to say here's the status. And let's go with font.bold. Like I said, almost the same design pattern as last video. Just a different way of doing things. So now we're going to go down into button land here. And this is where the magic happens. And we're going to just simply say on clicked if, and we want username. We've talked about type cohesion before, so we don't need to have that conversation, but we're comparing a string to a string. If we're going to say that, and then we're going to say the status equals hello. And you could get super snazzy like hello and then whatever the username is, but we don't really need to do that. And then we're going to say stat pop up, and we're just going to open that bad boy up. All right, save and run. And if everything works the way we expect it, we can just simply type in some garbage. Notice it's echoing that password mode. It's failed. All right, let's do this correctly. So I'm going to type in the username, in this case Brian, and then I'm going to delete this and type in our password, PASSWORD. Never, never, ever do that in a production app. Hello. So the takeaways from this is that once you start getting into a certain design pattern, it's easy and very quick to just rapidly build an application. Some of the things we probably did a little more difficult than we needed to, just to show you the long way. And some things may not be to your liking. For example, I have this inline. You may want to do it in a connections object. This video is going to cover a few new components, namely the scroll view and, you guessed it, a text area. So text area is a big, big, big area that we can actually do multiple lines of text, and we're going to wrap that into a scroll view so we can scroll them. So let me just take this, go Control A, Control V, and just paste some code. Voila. So the premise being, if you were on a smaller device like a cell phone and you had a large body of text, you could now scroll it. And you could say things like this. Going to show you how to work with the scroll view and automatically scroll down to new content. Let's see how this works. Going to do a lot of typing in this video. I'm not going to really do a lot of this in the designer. I might check the designer for a few things. It might show you a few little bugs. I don't want to paint the designer in a bad light. It's a great tool. There are some bugs, as there is with every software. All right, so column. One of the big arguments is that if you work in the designer, you forget how to code. It's at 100% not true. I actually switch between the two quite often. And in future videos, you're going to actually see me bounce back and forth more so than I have already. So I'm going to say anchors.fill, and we're going to parent. So this column is going to take up the entire window. Let's do a spacing of 5. Now we're going to add a scroll view. Now when I'm writing the code as opposed to dragging and dropping from the designer, I tend to add the components first. Not mandatory, but it's just something I do. So I'll put the main components on. For example, I'm going to put a text area in here. That way I have a general idea of what this is going to look like. I've worked with it enough. I can say, okay, so I've got a column that's going to take up everything. I've got a scroll view. And inside the scroll view, I've got a text area. But underneath all of that is a text field. It's pretty straightforward once you really get the hang of it. Let's go ahead and give this an ID. So we're going to say ID scroll view. And view is a little bit misleading. You might see this and go, oh, we're working with model view programming. No, this is a viewport, and it's a little bit different. Think of a viewport like literally looking out like your bedroom window or something. It's just looking into a different pane, a different area. So we're going to say width. I'm going to say parent dot width, and then height. And this is going to be the parent dot height minus, and we're going to do a little bit of math here. We're going to say the text field, and I haven't given that an ID yet, so let's jump down here, say ID text field. Doesn't really matter what ID we give it, as long as it has some sort of ID we can work with. So really I'm saying I want the scroll view to take up the entire parent, but from the height it's going to start at 0, 0 and go all the way down to the parent minus the height of this little guy here. Text area, this is going to be ID text area. Again, we should name that something a little more professional if this was a professional grade application. And parent dot width text, I'm just going to say nothing. I don't want anything in there to start off with. We are going to have some keyboard interaction down here. So I'm going to say focus is true. Text is just blank. And let's do some keyboard work. So we're going to say keys, which is our global for the actual keyboard, and we're going to say on return pressed. This is literally the enter key on the keyboard. And we're going to say text area dot append, and we're going to append the text area text. Actually, I'm sorry, the text field text. I was looking at something totally different here. There we go. We could have very easily just said, because again, when you're in the brackets, you have full access to the scope. Now, the problem comes in if you have a naming collision, like if the keys had a text, then you're going to have an issue. All right. Now we want to take this snazzy text field because we've already appended that into the text area, and we're just going to simply clear it. What we want to do next is, because we added something, we want to take the scroll view and automatically scroll down to it. And this is a little convoluted. It's a little more advanced than where we are, but I think we can do it. So we're going to say content item. And this is where IntelliSense is probably going to not help us. And we're going to say content Y equals, and what are we really doing here? So we're taking the scroll view, and the scroll area is pretty much everything in the brackets, or you should look at it as child components, this text area. That's our content item. And we're going to say the content Y, the up-down axis, we want to set that to a specific area, or I should say a specific point in space. So we're going to say text area dot height. So we're going to move it all the way to the bottom of that text area. So we're going to take that text area and move it up. But we want to minus the scroll view dot content item dot height. Looks confusing because it is confusing. All right, so we're going to take the scroll view. We're going to take that content item, this guy, and we're going to say its Y position, where it actually is on the screen, like if we were to actually move it, is going to equal the height of this thing minus the scroll view's content item height. So basically we said take your height minus your height. Very confusing. Let's explore this. And well, I want to make that a little longer. We have our text field here. Let's go ahead and I'm going to grab something off the screen, paste it in. So our scroll view is working. We can actually scroll now. And if we kind of adjust this window, we now have scroll bars in both directions. I want to take this and move it across. So text field width, it's going to be the parent.width. Let's explore this little guy, see if we've got too much down here. And I'm going to move this up, and I'm just going to say, hello, how are you? Very cool, huh? And I'm going to take some text. You can also type up here, by the way, if you really felt like it. And I'm going to say, hello, again. Notice how it does at the bottom. So I'm going to scroll all this up, and we're going to say, this is where we are. Just so you can see in the viewport where we are. we can scroll down, but as I type something, this is going to automatically scroll down for us. So I'm going to say, hello again, enter. Boom, drops us all the way down to the very bottom. Let's explore this a little bit here. And I'm going to stop it right here. So thinking about this logically, the text area and the scroll view's content item you would think are the same. Let's explore that a little bit. Again, I'm going to just copy and paste some text. Whoops. There we go. And we're going to say, we are here, just so you can see on the screen where we are. And I'm going to say, hello world. Whoop, what happened? Type it again. Hello. Nope, it's gone. Where is it? Well, if we scroll up, what really happened is it took the very bottom and shoved it up to the 0, 0 position. Let's try that one more time. Oh, it's gone. Now, if we just click, it's going to automatically pull it down. And that's what's going on here, is the content item is a little bit misleading. The content item is actually an invisible little container that this sits in. I'm probably saying that badly, and the documentation explains it much, much better, but it gets a little more advanced than where we are. Basically, scroll view content item Y is going to equal the text area height, the entire height of this guy, minus the content item height. Wow, that is confusing. This little line right here could probably be vastly improved, and to be brutally honest, I saw about 1,000 people out on Stack Overflow asking how to scroll the content here. So in short, scroll view is a little bit more complex, but it adds a lot of functionality into our little program. Looking at it in the designer, you can see what's going on here. We have a column with a scroll view, and the text area is a child. And looking at the scroll view, we can see we have a content height, and that is 16. Content height is for calculating total implicit height. So there's a lot of math going on here. Let me kind of expand that out so it's a little easier. We have width, height, and it's basically there's some math going on in there. We have different properties we can play around with. Big takeaway from this is, well, this can get very complex very quickly, but using a scroll view along with something like an editable text area, you can have some pretty cool things very quickly. So far, we've been largely ignoring the templates, and let's go ahead and deep dive into those. So first thing I'm going to do is hit New. Normally, I either use this one or I've already got it queued up and ready to go. So we're going to start exploring these templates down here, namely the scroll, stack, and swipe. We're going to take the cute, quick application scroll, and I'm going to slow way, way down just so you can see I'm not making any changes. Going to give it a name, default build system, minimal version, language. The kit, we're going to use the same kit that we've been using. As long as it says desktop and Qt, it's largely unimportant what the version and desktop platform and compiler and all that is, just desktop and Qt. No project management, and voila. So looking at this, it's pretty self-explanatory what's going on. We have an application window. We have a scroll view, which is just going to simply scroll the contents, which in this case is a list view. The list view itself is going to have a model with 20 items. And each item is going to be displayed as item plus whatever the number is. Let's go ahead and save run. So here's our application. We can scroll, and there's our 20 items. Pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to show you how to modify this. So let's close that. First thing we want to do is actually make our own model. So we're going to say list model, and I'm going to call this ID of model. Pretty self-explanatory. Try to keep things super simple, and this first element I'm going to key in manually. I'm going to say list element, and we'll say name. So really we're defining, if you will, a miniature model of data. I say miniature because these can get massive. Essentially a small database is what we're making. Any of you real database experts out there are going to go, this is not a database. You're absolutely right. I'm just trying to get people who are not familiar with databases to understand what's going on. So anyways, our first element is going to have a name, and let's have a phone number out there. More appropriately, this would be a data set. And let's add a number. Let's call this 555. I'm just going to say 5431. Now that we've got our model, we can plug that in. So we're going to say use this model. Now we want to change this delegate. The delegate's going to determine how each element's going to be displayed. So let's go ahead, go in here, and I'm going to make a component. You may be going, whoa, 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 what's a component? Well, it's a little bit challenging to explain. Even the documentation doesn't really help you too much, but basically a component encapsulates all the QML component definition. Huh? Isn't that the same thing as an item? Not really. So an item is a non-visual element. We've talked about the item before, and we're just going to make one now. And let's call this item, very super descriptive. So you can see I've got the item inside of the component. So you could actually have, say, multiple items in here if you wanted to, or rectangles or buttons or whatever. But the component encapsulates the entire definition of your component. It's a very kind of vague term. So when do you use one over the other? Honestly, in my experience, it really doesn't matter. Typically, I'll use component when I want to encapsulate some sort of functionality here. All right, so very basics. What we're going to do here is we're going to say the width. I want this to be 200. Height, let's say 50. And let's go ahead and put a column in here because remember the delegate's going to determine how this is displayed. And we want anchors. We're going to go ahead and fill the parent. Spacing 5. Now in this case, the parent is kind of hidden from us. The parent's going to be the actual list element, and it's not even the list element. It's the list item inside the delegate. So the delegate's going to say, hey, create a delegate, slam that list element into the list item, and it all happens in the background for us. So we've got to take our model, who has a name and a number, and make it visible somehow. So we need a few labels. So we're going to say label, let's say text, and I want to put the name in there. Notice IntelliSense is not figuring out what we're trying to do. And I'm going to say font, bold, true. And through the magic of copy and paste, I can just grab this. And we need to be able to put the number in here. So basically, we're going to take this list element. We need a name and a number, name, number. As long as those line up, you're good. Now let's change this to delegate. Doesn't really matter what we name that, as long as we can take it in here and put it right there. Oops. Delegate, there we go. So our model is lining up with our model. Our delegate is lining up with our delegate. And when we save and run, what it's going to do is going to load this model, and it's going to say for each list element, create a delegate and display it. Let's see what that looks like. So there's Bill Smith. Now I'm going to save a lot of typing. I'm just going to grab a bunch of these off the screen. I've already got them pre-written up and ready to go. And I'm just going to make a larger list model. Save and run. And voila. This video we're going to explore the stack view, and it's a little hard to wrap your head around at first, but the stack view provides a stack-based navigation model. I dare you to be more explanatory. All right, so basically, it's like you have a desk and you can stack papers on that desk. The first one's on the bottom, and then so on and so on all the way up to the top of the stack. It gets a little bit more in depth than that, and well, here's what it looks like. You have a home page and you have this title bar. You can also click and it opens a drawer. Think of this like your kitchen drawer where you open it up, and then you have things you can choose from. Page 1, page 2, and we're going to add page 3. I'm going to do this in real time with no edits just to show you how easy this is. Let's go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to say new. I'm going to take the Qt application stack, and it's got that little icon there that looks like a stack of papers. Choose. I'm going to call this QML for Beginners 9.2. Next, next. Everything's just going to be the default here. And right off the bat, it gives us just a ton of code. What's going on here? We have an app window, and we're going to set the header is going to be that toolbar. And here you can see we are opening the drawer or popping that stack view. Popping means take the top one. So we're going to say run. See what this looks like. So here's our header with our toolbar going across. And onClicked is going to say drawer open. Otherwise, take the top away. See how that works? And then we have our title and our drawer. The drawer is this little guy that pops open. And we have page 1 and page 2 listed in there. So let's, page 1, page 2. Those translate to the actual URL. Page1 form.ui, page2 form.ui, which are these guys right here. And if we open these up, they're pretty self-explanatory. And you can actually play around in the form editor. So for example, I'm going to make him, let's make him a snazzy blue color. I don't know what the actual color name is, but let's just call that snazzy blue. And I'm going to make this 15, nice and big. Jump back over here. We can go here, same thing. Let's give him like a snazzy green. I don't know the color names. Let's give that a 15. Let's go to our home page. And again, you can do that via form editor or actually via the text editor. Doesn't really matter. They both do the same thing. Let's give that a red. And let's do bold. Didn't take that. There we go. Ah, that's the style color. That's why. Mistakes were made, ladies and gentlemen. All right, there we go. Save that. Let's run it. See our stylized. All right, there's page 1, page 2. We're going to add page 3. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to add new. I'm going to go to Qt, and we're going to go to Qt Quick UI file. Normally we do the QML file, which is going to make a blank file. Doesn't really matter either way, but I'm going to do the UI file. Choose that. Kind of want to follow the same naming convention, so I'm going to say page 3. There's a page 1, page 2, and it's going to create the page 3 and page 3 form. Next, and finish. And it dumps us into this little guy, which is an item. So let's go in here, and I'm just going to, through the magic of copy and paste, going to go into page 3. And it said this file should only be edited in design mode. That's really not true. We can do it here if we really feel like it. So first things first, let's go ahead and grab a grid. I'm going to call this ID grid. Width, let's say 265, I'm just going to guess, and height, let's say 135. Again, just pulling numbers out of thin air. And I'm going to say anchors, center in, parent. Let's give this spacing of 10, columns of 2, and then we can just add a label. And let's say text. And let's go ahead and add a text field. We can give these some IDs if we really wanted to. And let's give this a text, a blank. Copy and paste, gotta love copy and paste. Again, doesn't really matter if we do it via code or if we actually go into the designer. Sometimes the designer doesn't really help us out here. You notice right off the bat we have some weird stuff up here, like we have a home form, page one form, all that. It's just the designer trying to figure out what we're doing. And we have the controls and everything. We could just literally just drag and drop if we really felt like it. So for example, let's find a button in here. We could drag and drop just like that. So the editor will really get cranky and tell us, hey, you must do this in design view, but I've just proven that's not the case. So now that we've got this little guy, let's jump in here and let's figure out how to add that page. So it's very simple. We're going to go to the drawer, and when you see the item delegate, remember delegate is going to delegate how something is rendered. So we're just going to add another delegate here. This is kind of the confusing bit. So normally, like if you're thinking of a list view, the delegate is going to determine how each item is done. Well, we have to add the items in individually, so we need a delegate for each item. So I'm going to say page 3 and then just page 3. And as long as that name aligns with what we're trying to put, we're good. Now we can go to page 3 and there's our form. This video is going to cover the swipe view. Again, I'm going to do this in real time with 0 edits, so you'll see every mistake, but I'm also going to show just how easy it is to work with this thing. So first off, swipe view. It enables the user to navigate pages by swiping sideways, hence swipe view. Documentation's a bit sparse, but they have some pretty interesting little animations that show you exactly how that works. Let's go ahead and take a look. First thing I want to do is pop open a real example. This is what we're going to end up doing. Notice these little tabs across the top. I'm wondering why they didn't call this tab view, because you can also click on the tabs. But the swipe view itself, you can actually click and drag, and I'm just clicking down here just to show you that it'll move between and synchronize. That is actually pretty cool. Let's take a look and see what it takes to build this thing. So we're going to go new. We're going to go down to the very bottom, and it's got the little arrows showing you that it's a swipe. And this is 9-3. Next, next, next. Just going to default on everything. And again, it looks pretty simplistic. We have an app window with a swipe view, and now notice the footer is a tab bar. So what we're really doing here is we're aligning the current index using a property binding with the swipe view current index. That's how we get that synchronization between the two. Save and run. Let's move that up so you can see it. So the tabs are on the bottom. I want to move them to the top. Instead of doing anything fancy, we can just simply say header. That is the actual part of the application window, not the swipe view. So we can say we want it in the header or down at the bottom in the footer. Has the same functionality either way because of that property binding. Let's go ahead and add a page, see how super simple this is. I'm going to go in here and let's modify these. I love playing around with the colors. This is so fun to do. So let's make this like a deep blue. And then let's call this bold 15. Here on page 1. Right off the bat, you notice what's missing is that home page. So by default, if we jump in here, it's just going to display the current index, which is, well, right here. So current index is also the tab bar current index. So you have what's called a cross property binding. So the tab bar is going to be the swipe views index. The swipe views index is going to be the tab bars index. So by default, the first one is 0, which is this guy. It's in the order that they were added. So if you wanted to flip them around, you just move this one to the top. Demonstrate that here in a second. Page 2, I'm going to say, I need a good, I don't even know what color that is. Crazy. Let's call that crazy pink. Put that as 15. Save. And save and run. Now we've got our colors. because everything should be colorful. Let's flip these around. Notice how we have goofed up our interface. So really, it's not a big deal. It's just we have tab buttons and we just have to rearrange those. This is one of the real fallbacks here, is that if you move these around in the swipe view, you also have to move them around in the tab bar. There is a more advanced way of doing it that I'm going to cover in the intermediate stuff. Just know that if you start playing around with the order, well, you're going to have a bad time and you'll have to do it down here as well. Super simple to fix that. You would just change the ordering and then life goes on. Going to put all that back the way it was. And we're going to add our own page. So I'm going to go right click here, add new. And we want a cute quick UI file. Let's call this page 3. And I can go in here and let's just copy. Let's go into our UI file here. Notice how it keeps trying to push us into the designer. Nothing wrong with that. I just want to paste that in there. And I'm going to click this button to switch to design view. We are on page 3. Now I want to change this color, so let's make a really, I need a good color, maybe a green. There we go. And of course, like with anything else, we can just drag and drop controls, images, whatever we want to do on here, as long as we have the proper imports in place. And I'm going to show you very quickly, very easily, how we can do this. So I'm going to just copy this. And we're going to say page 3. Now, if you're wondering why these are blank brackets, it's just simply how you add a component in. A lot of times you'll see it looking like that. I'm going to add the page in, but I'm not going to add the tab in. Let's see what that does. So we've got page 1, page 2, and well, we can go to page 3, but there's no tab. I just wanted to show that you can make it independent. So let's add a tab in there. Very simple. Copy, paste. And as long as your tabs align with the same order as your pages, you're good to go. Now we have our 3. And it doesn't matter if we swipe or if we actually use the tabs. The concept of having multiple pages actually bumps the complexity way, way up. One of the questions that's going to arise is, how do you pass information between these pages? And we're going to look at a basic example, and I'm going to record this end to end so you can see all my mistakes, and there will be mistakes. I'm going to say 9.4. This is not an easy topic, and a lot of tutorials try to skip over this and just leave the end user, you, to figure out how to do this for yourself. But we're going to look at a very basic example. What we want to do here, save and run, is we have 2 pages. First page, I want to be able to edit a value, and then the second page, I want to be able to display that value and be able to seamlessly go back and forth. The first question is going to be, what are we going to do? I'm just going to do it very simple. We're just going to allow you to enter a name or a string of some kind and then pass that back and forth using property bindings. So let's dive in. Actually, let me kill this. All right, first things first. What is the most consistent thing? You guessed it, the main.qml with our app window. So we're going to make a property and then pass that property between these pages. Let's sidebar real quick and we're going to modify these pages. So we are on page 1 and I'm going to get rid of that so it snaps up there. And I want a column. Let's go ahead and snap that in. Whoops, got the wrong one there. Got a little click happy. There we go. Move that here. This is why I try to shy away from this, because it's so easy to get so screwed up. All right, now that we've got our column here, let's go ahead and modify our spacing. Let's say we want this at 10, and we just want a label and a text field. Drag and drop. drag and drop. Pretty simple, pretty easy interface here. Say enter your name, and then I'm going to blank the text out on this guy. This has an ID of text field. Because we're going to be passing around a variable, I want to do properties. So I'm going to just make sure the page is selected. I'm going to add a property here. And let's call this name. And this is going to be a little cumbersome. It doesn't like to scroll for me. I'm going to choose an alias, and this does not help us very much. So I'm going to say text field.text. And if you misspell it, you're going to have a bad time. So what I always do is after I've gone in there and done that, I'll go into the actual editor and I'll go up to our property and I'll delete that last little bit and I'll say dot. And if IntelliSense is helping us out, 99% of the time we've spelled everything correctly. If you're ultra paranoid, you can just grab that ID, copy, paste. Remember, a property alias is like a C++ pointer. It's just going to point to something. So if I call name, it's going to actually point to the text field text. Whew. All right. This is what this is going to look like. Save and run. Premise being we'll be able to type something in here and then seamlessly go over here and it'll display. So let's go here. Let's go to our page 2. Grab this guy. I'm going to do a little bit of layout wizardry here. Grab a label, drag drop. It's going to pump it right over there. Not super helpful. And I'm going to put it right here. And we're going to actually type in the word here. There we go. Let's call this something like, I need a good name, a good solid name. My label. Why not? So very descriptive. Let's go ahead and let's do a property alias here. We can do it either via the property editor or we can actually just key it in. Doesn't really matter. And we're going to say my label.text. And as long as your ID lines up, you're good to go. All right, now that we've got those two in there, this is where the fun bit happens. What we need to do is make a property in here and then link it, or I should say bind it. So we're going to say property. This is going to be a string called name. Default value is going to be just blank. Once we get that in there, now we need a way of passing this around, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So page 1 is where we're going to edit. So I'm going to say editor, and then display is page 2. That way we don't get confused about what we're talking about here. Now, page 1, what we want to do is we want to actually track when that current index changed, but it's not going to emit a signal. So we're going to say component dot on completed. And we've talked about component briefly, and it's basically going to encapsulate all the functionality of a, shockingly enough, component. So we want to know when that thing's fully loaded, and that is the on completed. So we're going to say the name property equals root, and I actually need to set an ID here. So our window ID is root, and we're going to say we want the root name. So what's going on here is our page 1 form has a property called name, and we want to set that to this one. So we're basically saying set text field.text to the application Windows property called name. Save, run. Let's see what that looks like. Of course, it does absolutely nothing so far, but we can go like this, and it's holding it in memory. Under the hood, what's really happening is when this page form is uncompleted, we're setting this text to whatever that property is. Doesn't really graphically help us out that much. So what I want to do now is kind of scroll down here. And I want to say on current index changed. And we're going to actually console.log. I want to see that actual current index. just so I know what's going on in the background here. And I'm going to say if current index is 1. Remember, this is a 0 base, so this is actually page 2. I'm going to say root dot name page 1 dot name, and then page 2. We got to actually give these IDs. Let's back up here. There we go. That's why it's not working. So page 1. There we go. Now IntelliSense is picking it up. Usually when you're typing and IntelliSense is not helping you out, even if it's badly helping you out, that's when you should be a little afraid. All right, so page 2, we're saying when the current index of the swipe view changes, then we're going to track that. And if it's on page 2, then we're going to say root name equal page 1 name, meaning our editor, and then page 2 name equal root name. Could we do page 2 name equal page 1 name? Yes, but we may start losing that variable. It may go off into Never Never Land, and we don't want to let that happen. And then we're going to say, kind of doing this a little backwards here, we're going to say and we could just to kind of flip this around, do it like that. Doesn't really matter. Save and run. See, there's Brian. And we can actually click here, and it's on there as well. So it doesn't really matter. As long as we've got those property bindings in there, we can pass that data back and forth. This is, I want to say, a convoluted way of doing it. There are much better ways of doing it. Some of those ways of doing it that are much better get way more advanced than what we're talking about in this video series, but I wanted to show you a bare bones basic way of doing simple property bindings and passing data back and forth. The beautiful thing about programming is there's more than one way to solve a problem. We're going to take that same problem in the last video and do it completely differently. So we're going to be able to pass information back and forth between pages. Let's go new. We're going to take swipe view, and we're going to stick with pretty much the same design pattern. And again, I'm going to do this with 0 video edits, so you will see all of my mistakes, and there will probably be many, so be warned. All right, so this is 9.5. Next, and I'm just going to blast through all the defaults on that. Let's kill these others. So generally what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 pages. Doesn't matter if we kind of scroll through or we hit these little tabs, does the same thing. This one's going to allow us to edit, and then this one's going to have a label with a button, and when we click the button, it's going to change the label. The premise being we can go back and forth, and that information persists between the 2. Let's go ahead and dive in and see what this looks like. So first things first, let's grab this guy. Jump him up there, and let's grab a column. I'm going to just go through these interfaces as fast as possible. I'm not going to waste much of your time. And let's go right there. Let's grab a label, and let's grab a text field. Let's go ahead and click this column. Let's give it a spacing of 10. If you've skipped from previous videos into this one, you're probably going, whoa, whoa, slow down. I would highly encourage you to go back and watch the other videos. All right, so big takeaway from this must have an ID of some kind. And we can go into, and we'll save because this thing has betrayed us in the past. And I'm going to make a property. Let's call this name. And let's make this an alias. And this is going to be the text field. So we can actually just click this guy. We should have a beautiful property right there. It is. All right. As long as that's named appropriately and it's pointing to the right component, we're good to go. So let's go ahead and jump over to page 2. Page 2 is going to be slightly different but very similar. I'm going to grab this guy, go here, jump him up, drag drop a column. Just going to kind of finagle this. That's the actual term I'm going to use, finagle. Whoops. Always do that. I had the label selected and it always jumps it around. There we go. I would almost call that a design bug. So when you take something, watch down in the navigator here. I have the column selected. I'm going to drag and drop this label. You would think that because we just added that, it would select it, but no, it still has the column selected. It betrays us. So I'm going to take a button, drag, drop, boom. Now suddenly it's got the column and the label selected, even though the button's the one that I'm interested in because I just drag and dropped it. Little frustrating bug there, but it's not a huge deal. All right, so we can take this, snap him, take this, snap him. Let's put some spacing in here, just make it look beautiful. He's going to say, click me. And this guy's got to have some sort of label or some sort of ID. We're going to call that label. And I'm going to call this title right there. Now I'm going to do an inline function. IDE might get a little cranky on me, so I'm going to make sure I save my work. And here we're going to actually go up and we're going to manually add a property. And we're going to say alias name, and this is going to be our label.text. So unclicked in that button, I'm going to say name equal hello world. Now when I click that button, it'll say hello world. So let's save run. Let's see what we got so far. So we can type in here and it will actually switch it around, and we can go here and click and it changes it to hello world. But now we want to be able to pass that information back and forth. Notice how we've got two different properties. All right, let's dive into our main here. And this is where it's going to get really, really confusing really, really fast. And you'll see me probably make some mistakes, even though I've already made some mistakes. But anyways, so first things first, we're going to give this an ID. Call this root. And let's make a property. Let's give it a default value. Now, what we want to do next is we want to actually comment these out. Now, doing so, we are saying that page 1 and page 2 do not exist. We're doing this for a specific reason. We want to actually take control of the creation process and set those properties ourselves. So we're going to do some property bindings. So I'm going to copy and paste a link in case anybody has any questions on this. So property value initialization is the actual link that I'm sitting out there. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to say property, and we're going to make this a var, and we're going to say page 1. Really what we're doing is we are effectively making a custom component, and we're going to create that as an empty object. So we have a variable named page 1. These brackets denote that we're creating. Those denote scope, which is the same thing as these brackets here. And that is what it looks like. A little bit confusing, and I wish they'd explain that a little better. I don't mean to come off like I'm complaining, but Qt's documentation is usually beautiful. It's some of the best documentation in the world, but with QML, it gets really, really confusing. So anyways, we've got a page 1 and a page 2. Now we're going to take full ownership and create these ourselves. So let's jump up here. And actually, I'm going to do it underneath. And what we're going to say is component. And we want to know onCompleted. So once the swipe view is loaded, we want to actually create some children here. So once we learn JavaScript, and I'm going to actually type this in here poorly. we can add functions, and it's much more efficient as a function. I haven't specifically covered JavaScript yet because I didn't want to start with, hey, let's learn QML, but first let's learn JavaScript. I wanted to actually introduce QML and a lot of its components before we start adding the complexity of JavaScript, even though we've used some basic JavaScript so far. We're going to call this component. I'm going to lowercase that. This is going to be component 1, and what we're going to do here is we're going to say Qt dot, and we're going to create component, and we need to give it a string. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go in and we're going to load this file and say load this into memory. So I'm going to right click, rename, and just grab that name, jump back into our main, paste.qml. So we're just giving it the file name. So really we're just saying Qt, go out here and load that file. Once we have that file, then we need to actually create it in memory. So we're going to say page1 equals component dot, and we want to do a create object. And IntelliSense is not going to help us on this. So if you're a fast typer, you're going to have to suddenly slow down. So using Qt, you know that the fundamentals of Qt and memory management are you have a parent-child hierarchy, and this is no different. Under the hood, what's happening is some objects are being created in memory. We're literally saying create objects. So we're basically saying C++ new, meaning we're creating a pointer to something. So using Qt's memory management, we want to make sure it has a parent. So swipe view is going to be the parent. So when the swipe view is destroyed, this component is automatically destroyed with it, and so is the page, and so on and so on. All right, now that we have that, we are going to actually set our properties. So name equals, and then we want the root.name. And that's how we're passing that initial parameter. And actually we're binding the property. So we're going to say component 2, page form 2, page 2. And then because we have them both named, it's very simple what we're doing there. We're just doing some property binding. And then let's go ahead, add item, and we want to add page 1 and page 2. Save and run. All right, if you've gotten to this point and you do not see these, well, you're in trouble, and I screwed something up. Let's see here. There we go. If you do not see these, you've screwed something up. Why is that? Oh, I know why. Or do I? Ah, yes, it's right here. See, this is component 1, so it's loading that. So if I just simply switch that to 2, there we go. Now it should work as expected. All right, again, if you get to this point and you do not see these two, that means you have failed in this area somewhere. And usually 9 times out of 10, it's the actual name. Check the spelling. Once you see these, life can go on, and these function independently. See? Ta-da! Now what we need to do is wire those up. We're going to do that through, you guessed it, on current index change. So we're going to go here, and we're going to say on current index change, and then it's pretty much the same code that we had last time. So we're going to say console log, and we'll say current index so we know what's going on here. And I'm going to say if current index equals 0, and then I'm going to say root.name is going to be the page 2 dot name. It's a little bit backwards because we're going from the other page to the very first one. It's kind of like if we were swiping back, and we're going to say page 1 dot name equals root dot name. So really we're just synchronizing the values. So it's not true property binding. We've got to do a little bit of hand holding here, otherwise Qt gets very, very confused. And then we're going to say page 2. And if everything's lined up the way it should be, then you should be good to go. Let's test this. So enter your name, Brian. Brian. We can test this by saying your full name. Swipe over, Brian Cairns. If I click this, it's going to change it to Hello World. And I can go back and it's Hello World. So now we have two-way variable sharing. This is easy. Compared to other frameworks and languages, this is very, very straightforward. So some caveats and some takeaways here is we are not doing true property binding. True property binding, we wouldn't have to really worry about updating all this. It gets pretty complex, but I think we've got the bare basics of what you need to pass information around between different pages.